Chapter 155. He Tianshu still had the awareness of a master. He confirmed again and again in a responsible manner, "Do you really understand it?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded her head vigorously, "Captain He, I'm sure, definitely. I really understand it. I'm just waiting for you to demonstrate it to me." He Tianshu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was so certain, but he was still doubtful. He demonstrated the first level of ethereal steps to Zhang Xiaohua in the forest and taught her the incantation to use her inner strength. After Zhang Xiaohua saw it, she naturally couldn't use the incantation to use her inner strength, but she could imitate the movement. She imitated it right in front of He Tianshu. He Tianshu, who had once taught Zhang Xiaohua fist techniques, naturally had a direct understanding of Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts aptitude. He never thought that he would be able to teach Zhang Xiaohua in a single morning. He had already made sufficient mental preparations. But the reality before his eyes made He Tianshu's jaw drop. Although the movement that Zhang Xiaohua imitated for the first time was clumsy and unfamiliar, her posture, angle, and footwork were all correct. He Tianshu even suspected that Zhang Xiaohua had secretly practiced the ethereal steps before teaching him. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua looking at him, He Tianshu was speechless. Her movement was very correct and incomparably precise. If it wasn't for the fact that Zhang Xiaohua didn't have any inner strength, he would have been able to fly high. Seeing He Tianshu looking at her with hidden bitterness, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had goosebumps. She carefully asked, "Captain He, what's wrong? I was wrong, right? Please demonstrate again." "I'm sorry." He Tianshu blinked and said, "There's no need." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly went up and considerately said, "Captain He, you must be tired. Take a rest first. Do you want me to pour you some water? After you've rested, you can demonstrate again." He Tianshu waved his hand unhappily and said, "There's no need. You've practiced very well. Really, practice a few more times." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't believe his ears. "Really? Am I practicing it correctly?" Seeing He Tianshu nod his head, Zhang Xiaohua was ecstatic. This was the first time since she started practicing martial arts that she had learned it so quickly. Could it be that she had become smarter? Striking while the iron was hot, Zhang Xiaohua practiced a few more times and became even more proficient. Moreover, her body became even lighter, as though she was about to float and fly. Zhang Xiaohua became excited from practicing and actually dashed into the depths of the forest. He Tianshu was even more dumbstruck. Could it be that the ethereal steps was tailor-made for Zhang Xiaohua? He didn't even have a foundation in internal energy yet, but he was able to perform it so well. There was a hint of qigong between his steps. How long had it been since he started practicing? He knew Zhang Xiaohua's foundation. It must be her first time coming into contact with qigong. Just as he was lost in thought, he heard a scream from the forest. "Ouch, I can't stop myself. Team leader He, save me." He Tianshu's heart turned cold. Moving his feet, he executed ethereal steps and dashed into the depths of the forest. The scene in front of him made him laugh heartily. Zhang Xiaohua was stuck to a tree like a dead fish as she slowly slid down. He Tianshu walked forward lightly and helped Zhang Xiaohua up before asking her in detail. It turned out that Zhang Xiaohua's qigong practice was so exciting that she was shuttling through the forest. Her steps were light and quick, as though she was flying on the grass. However, due to the lack of internal energy, she was unable to push her body into the air. But the technique of using inertia in ethereal steps was extraordinary. Zhang Xiaohua's speed was getting faster and faster. She had never experienced such speed before, and not long after, she lost control of her steps and body. Seeing that she was about to crash into a tree not far away, she had no choice but to cry for help. Unfortunately, He Tianshu was deep in thought and didn't pay attention to her. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua could only make the closest physical contact with the tree in front of her. Hearing this, He Tianshu found it funny. Thinking back to when he had just started practicing qigong, wasn't it the same? He had even fallen from a tree before. He Tianshu helped Zhang Xiaohua wipe off the mud on her body before explaining in detail the things she needed to take note of when using Qigong, as well as some necessary techniques. Zhang Xiaohua naturally listened attentively to her pain. He Tianshu, who was speaking with assurance, had unconsciously neglected the fact that Zhang Xiaohua was actually able to crash into the tree's height without internal energy. After a few days, Zhang Xiaohua's Qigong had become proficient. This was something He Tianshu had not expected. For him to be able to learn such miraculous Qigong, he was naturally grateful to Zhang Xiaohua. As mentioned earlier, he had prepared himself with great courage to face Zhang Xiaohua's aptitude. However, the truth had greatly exceeded his expectations. Not only did Zhang Xiaohua learn and comprehend the ethereal steps he had imparted, even the Qigong techniques that he had imparted, Zhang Xiaohua was able to grasp them in one go. She was even able to comprehend them by analogy. This really left He Tianshu scratching his head. Could it be that this brat was born to run? Thinking back to the hardships he had suffered in order to learn Qigong, He Tianshu was almost doubting who had the worst aptitude. He Tianshu now really wanted to teach Zhang Xiaohua some internal cultivation techniques. He wanted to see how Qigong would be like after she learned internal energy. Would she be able to reach the level of 10,000 miles seeking plum blossom? Of course, there was another thing that left He Tianshu astonished. Zhang Xiaohua's lightness when she executed her movement techniques, as well as some inexplicable trajectories, had given He Tianshu some inspiration. This was something that Zhang Xiaohua had casually executed, and not something that He Tianshu had imparted to her. These inspirations had helped He Tianshu gain a deeper understanding of ethereal steps. He had originally thought that he had already mastered the first level of ethereal steps, but when he saw the highlights in Zhang Xiaohua's footwork, he realized that there were still many things that could be studied. Hence, He Tianshu delayed his cultivation progress and did not immediately begin cultivating the second level of ethereal steps. On one hand, it was the rapid improvement of ethereal steps. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. On the other hand, it was the cultivation of the Heart Sutra. She did not take a single step forward. Sigh, it was truly a combination of ice and fire. On this day, Zhang Xiaohua had finished practicing her fist and sword techniques in the forest. After playing around with her Qigong for a while, she slowly walked back to the small courtyard. Before she reached the small round gate, she saw two people who looked like guards standing at the entrance of the courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. Guards rarely came here. Could it be that something had happened? When she reached the small round gate, she saw the two guards standing there. On the small stone bench in the courtyard, there was another person sitting there. Upon closer inspection, it was Li Jinfeng, Li Dashu. Li Jinfeng was sitting on the stone bench and was bored from waiting. When he heard footsteps, he turned around and saw Zhang Xiaohua. He smiled and stood up. Zhang Xiaohua was also pleasantly surprised. The last time she saw Li Jinfeng was a year ago. In the blink of an eye, a few months had passed. She happily ran forward and pulled Li Jinfeng's hand. She said, "Brother Li, why are you here? It's been a long time." Li Jinfeng was also happy. He looked at his cheap initiate disciple. After not seeing him for a few months, he had grown a lot. His eyes were clearer, without the confusion and curiosity of the first time they met. He could not help touching Zhang Xiaohua's head and said, "Why didn't you go to the academy to see me? I didn't want to miss you, so I took the time to come out." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua and Li Jinfeng were familiar with each other, the two guards next to the courtyard gate walked forward. After carefully asking about Zhang Xiaohua's identity and even what was written on the pen, they nodded and left with ease. When the two guards walked away, Zhang Xiaohua quickly pulled Li Jinfeng into the room. She poured a cup of water for him and then chatted with him. Li Jinfeng asked curiously, "Xiaohua, what's going on with your Huanqi manor? After the new year, I went to the Lotus Escort Agency to find Zhang Xiaohu. I heard that he went on a long journey and couldn't find him. I guessed that you must be in the manor, so I came to find you. However, the number of guards in your manor is much more than before." I told them many times that I've been here before and that I'm familiar with you. I also said that I know Captain He, but they didn't let me in. I was almost anxious with them. I wanted them to tell you that even if I didn't go in, it's fine to let you out, but they didn't let me in. Don't you think it's infuriating? What could Zhang Xiaohua say? She just smiled and said, "It's nothing. It's just the new year, so the manor has tightened the security. I'm afraid that something will happen." Li Jinfeng was still puzzled and said, "But they didn't have to let you see me. It's really outrageous. As the saying goes, a scholar can't reason with a soldier. Even if I had 10 mouths, I still wouldn't be able to win against them." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and didn't say anything. She thought that great scholar Li must have been angry because he was not allowed to enter the manor last time. She heard him continue to nag, "That's right, today is the same. Why did they suddenly let 2 people follow me? Last time when I came with your second brother, we just registered and came in alone. This time, I have to see them in person." No matter what Li Jinfeng said, Zhang Xiaohua only said perfunctorily, "This tight security is just for our safety. If it wasn't tight, wouldn't it be terrible if a thief came in? And that's reasonable. The day before yesterday, our academy lost a lot of books." Li Jinfeng scratched his head and said, "You say, of all the things to steal, why not? Why did they have to steal books? Although scholars stealing books can't be called stealing, it's still a disgrace to the educated." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "If scholars stealing books can't be called stealing, then what can it be called?" "Stealing books." Li Jinfeng seemed to be ashamed of Zhang Xiaohua's ignorance. Pfft! Zhang Xiaohua spat out the tea that she had just drunk, almost spitting it on Li Jinfeng. She asked in confusion, What's the difference?" "Educated. This is the educated's elegance and dignity," Li Jinfeng said righteously. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Li Jinfeng took a sip of tea and remembered something. He asked, "That's right, Xiaohua, I went to the escort agency to look for your second brother. I heard that he's no longer working there. When I asked the guard called Xiao Si, he was so secretive and didn't tell me anything. He just said that he's looking for a better job. I found it strange. Why can't he tell me where he's going? Do you know where Zhang Xiaohu went? If it's not possible, I'll go look for the teachers in the academy and see if they can find a better place for him." Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled. It was an honor for the Lotus Flower Escort Agency that Zhang Xiaohu could be a disciple of the Misty School. She didn't know why the guard was so tight-lipped about it. However, Li Jinfeng seemed to have misunderstood the guard's intentions. He thought that something had happened to Zhang Xiaohu and that he had been chased out by the escort agency. Hearing that Li Jinfeng was so concerned about finding a job for her second brother, Zhang Xiaohua felt warmth in her heart. She had to admit that this young master Li Jinfeng was a warm-hearted person. She and her brother were not related to him at all. They were just traveling together on the way to Pingyang City. Not only did he visit them frequently, he even taught them how to read and write. He was truly their first teacher. On the other hand, Sheng Wanyun and Yu Luan from the Lotus Escort Agency had also arrived at Pingyang City in the same carriage. Their attitudes were completely different from his. With this comparison, it was obvious who was better. Could Zhang Xiaohua not feel close to them? At the thought of this, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Brotherly, don't worry. My second brother is doing very well now. He's just gone to a place to practice martial arts. He's very happy." "Oh yes, can you guess where he went?" Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua did not look nervous, Li Jinfeng guessed that she was not worried about Zhang Xiaohu. He thought for a while and said, "How would I know about you martial arts practitioners? I think I heard you mention before that he was going to the martial arts center of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Why did he change to another place?" "I can't guess. He can't possibly be going to that Misty School that you mentioned." Zhang Xiaohua laughed even more when she heard this. She said, "Brother Li is really a smart person. You guessed it so quickly." Li Jinfeng was a little surprised. He continued, congratulations, congratulations. I really didn't expect your second brother to have such a fortuitous encounter. I heard from you that it's very difficult to enter that school. Moreover, when I returned to the academy, I also asked the local students. They said that the school only accepts children around 5 years old. Your second brother is definitely not 15 years old. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and explained, it's also because of fate that second brother met an old friend. That person saw that second brother's aptitude was very good and took pity on him. That's why he accepted him into the school. Good aptitude? Li Jinfeng said in surprise, Zhang Xiaohua, I remember that your aptitude is even more extraordinary. Why didn't they choose you? Zhang Xiaohua pouted and said, I can read and write, but once I practice martial arts, I'll become a completely different person. Just like before, there's no other way. Li Jinfeng also knew about the embarrassing incident of Zhang Xiaohua practicing martial arts. He smiled and did not ask further. Zhang Xiaohua asked again, Brother Li, where did you spend the new year? Don't tell me you also stayed in Pingyang City. Hearing this, Li Jinfeng smiled mysteriously and said, although I went to the escort agency and Lai Mountain Villa to look for you after the new year, I spent the new year in Lu Town. You're back home, Brother Li. Zhang Xiaohua was very excited to hear news of her hometown. She continued to ask, is everyone at home well? And although Zhang Xiaohua did not finish her sentence, Li Jinfeng knew what she meant. He smiled and said, my family is very good. Your family is also very good. Really? Zhang Xiaohua could not believe her ears. It had been more than a year since she left the Guizhuang house. Usually, when she saw him practicing martial arts and reading, he did not seem to be homesick. However, he was still a teenager after all. How could he not be homesick just because he wanted to? She remembered that when she went to the Lotus Escort Agency last year, she wanted second brother to bring his monthly allowance home. After that, she encountered so many things and forgot about the money. She vaguely remembered that second brother seemed to have said that he wanted Li Jinfeng to help him bring a message and money back when he went back for the new year. Second brother had already left the Lotus Escort Agency before the new year, so he probably did not fulfill this request. At the thought of this, Zhang Xiaohua quickly took out the money pouch in her arms and said, Brother Li, I have some money here. Why don't you take it first and help me bring it back the next time you go back? Hearing this, Li Jinfeng quickly stopped her and said, Don't, Zhang Xiaohua, put it away first. It's still too early for me to go back home. I don't even know when the next time I go back will be. Who knows, maybe you will go back before me. Oh, so it's like that. Zhang Xiaohua helplessly took back the money pouch and said, If Brother Li has a chance to come back, you must let us know first, okay? Li Jinfeng said, That's for sure. Didn't I go back before the new year to find you first? However, your second brother went out to run the Lotus Escort Agency, so I didn't see him. Luckily, your second brother was careful and left the money that should be brought back. I already gave it to your parents the last time I went back. Is that so? That's great. Oh right, Brother Li, quickly tell me about my family. Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat impatient to hear news about her family. Well, I heard from your parents that there didn't seem to be any changes when they left with you. He. Li Jinfeng was obviously not a very good descriptor. Zhang Xiaohua did not give up and said, Then just say whatever you want. Li Jinfeng thought about it and said, That's right, your father and mother look very young. I think my father and mother should be about the same age as your father and mother. Why do they look 10 years younger than my father and mother? Is that so? That can't be. I remember that when I was born, my parents also looked very normal. Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled, but then he understood and asked, Then, what else? Oh right, your sister-in-law is also very beautiful. I really can't tell that your brother has such good luck to be able to find such a good wife. Li Jinfeng said with some envy. My brother is like me, extremely handsome. Naturally, he can find a woman as beautiful as my sister-in-law. Zhang Xiaohua said narcissistically. You're bragging. Li Jinfeng laughed and said, to be honest, although the three of you brothers are not ugly, you really can't be said to be handsome. You don't have the slightest touch of chic. Hee hee. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and then told the story of his brother and sister-in-law. Li Jinfeng sighed and clapped his hands. It's so touching. A beauty accompanying a hero. It's only right. However, Zhang Xiaohua, I really can't tell. That evil tyrant is the wolf of Lu Town. He has been harming Lu Town for a long time, and you actually dared to go up. I can only say that I admire you. Everything else is nonsense. Don't talk about other things. Brotherly, let's talk about my family. How's the farming at home now? I've also farmed the land on the south slope. Oh right, how's my father's health? How about my mother? Also, did my brother have a child? Oh right, doesn't Mr. Liu also live at our place? How is he? Also, is my grandmother's grave tidy? Zhang Xiaohua asked a bunch of questions in one breath. In the end, he thought of his beloved grandmother and his eyes instantly turned red. Please collect it, thank you. Chapter 156. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's sad appearance, Li Jinfeng immediately acted like a child who had made a mistake. He rubbed his hands in embarrassment and said, This, Xiaohua, really, how do I say this? I don't know where your grandmother's grave is and I haven't paid my respects. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she forced a smile and said, It's okay, brotherly. I was too impatient. I suddenly heard news about my family and wanted to know more. Then she said sadly, Grandmother has already been gone for a year. Thinking about it, that day seems like yesterday. Brotherly is a guest from afar and isn't very familiar with our family. Father and mother naturally wouldn't tell you these things. If they really did ask you to pay your respects, it would definitely be neglectful. Li Jinfeng scratched his head and said, Yes, I don't think I saw anything black and white at home, so I didn't think in that direction. If I had met you two when I returned home before the new year and you two reminded me, I might have been able to help you take a look. Then he said, Your eldest brother seems to know what's on your mind. He told me to tell you that you don't have to worry about the land on the hillside. He helped you look after it well. That land seems to be very fertile and has already been harvested. The harvest is a bit higher than other lands. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was slightly happy and said, Really? I opened up that land bit by bit. It's not a waste of my hard work to have such a good harvest. That's right. Also, your family's harvest last year was very good. It's enough for this year's consumption. Your father went to Lu Town to sell a lot before the new year and really made a lot of money. Hee hee. When Zhang Xiaohua heard about her family's wealth, she was naturally happy. Li Jinfeng thought for a moment and then said, As for your eldest brother's child, I haven't seen him. Looking at your sister-in-law, she doesn't seem to be pregnant either. The two of them have been married for a year. Why don't they work harder? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little indignant when she thought of hugging her little nephew. Li Jinfeng was amused when he heard this. He flicked Zhang Xiaohua's head and said with a smile, Why are you in such a hurry? I see that your brother and sister-in-law have a good relationship. It's only a matter of time before they have a child in the family. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her aching head and said with grievance, I'm also concerned about the next generation of the Zhang family. Learning martial arts should start from a young age. I can't let my little nephew lose at the starting line. I also have to plan for a rainy day. Don't, you should practice your martial arts first. Li Jinfeng was a bit speechless and said, How can you be in charge of educating children? Moreover, don't you have old Master Liu in your family? He's a man of great knowledge. Under his influence, I reckon that your future in literature will be better than your half-baked martial arts. That's right, this old Master Liu is really amazing. As the ancients say, there are sages in the world who live in seclusion in the mountains. I didn't think so. This time I went to your family and talked with this old Master Liu. Only then did I know that this saying was true. Old Mr. Lu's knowledge isn't any worse than the old pedants of our academy. I really admire you. Is that so? I just found out. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, my sister-in-law's father is naturally amazing. Moreover, my sister-in-law's knowledge is also very good. In the past, I didn't spend much time with her and didn't realize it. But in that short period of time, my sister-in-law gave me a lot of advice. I firmly remembered many of her words in my heart. Now that I've read books and compared them with what she said, I found that those words were penetrating insights. Li Jinfeng felt a wave of yearning and said sadly, like father, like daughter. It's probably like that. It's a pity that I didn't talk much with your sister-in-law and didn't experience her elegance. That's right, does your sister-in-law have a younger sister? Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, she doesn't have a direct younger sister. But, she has a younger cousin. Is that so? Li Jinfeng's eyes lit up and asked, what's her name? Does she have an engagement? Zhang Xiaohua said, her name is Lu Yeye. She lives in Bali Valley. As for an engagement, how would I know? Next time when you go back, you can ask around. But, I have to tell you in advance. Li Jinfeng said blankly, what are you trying to say? Zhang Xiaohua smiled strangely and said, Sister Yeye doesn't seem to be as beautiful as Sister Qiu Tong. Also, Mr. Lu's younger brother is a butcher who slaughters pigs. He's very fierce to people. When Li Jinfeng heard this, he looked around and said seriously, Xiaohua, you misunderstood me. I'm just concerned about you and want to know more about your living environment. Whether or not Miss Lu Yeye is beautiful, what does it have to do with me? Don't you think so? Oh yes, your sister-in-law is so beautiful. There's no reason that her younger cousin can't even compare to Qiu Tong. It's really strange. Looking at Li Jinfeng's expression, Zhang Xiaohua was a little amused. She continued to ask, Brother Li, don't think about other things. Tell me more about your family. Li Jinfeng continued, that's right, the money that your second brother gave me, I gave it all to your parents. When they received the money, they were so happy that tears fell from their eyes. They only kept saying, child has grown up, child has grown up. I knew that there was also your monthly allowance in it, so I told them. But I didn't know that it was better if I didn't say it. They cried even more when they heard it. Zhang Xiaohua also felt a little sad. I saw that they missed you, so I told them about the interesting stories of you practicing martial arts and learning how to read and write. Only then did they feel more at ease. Oh right, I didn't tell them about your injuries. I thought that if I told them, they would definitely rush to Pingyang City overnight to drag you back. Huh, how's your right hand now? Don't let them see any clues when you go back. Zhang Xiaohua raised her right hand and made a few flexing and stretching movements nimbly. She said, it's already fine. I should be able to recover after some time. I believe that father and mother won't be able to tell. Li Jinfeng nodded and said, Old Master Lu was also very happy to hear that you were enlightened. They even asked why you didn't write a letter home since you could read and write now. I could only say that I left in a hurry and didn't meet with you. At this point, Li Jinfeng took out a letter from his chest and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua with a smile. He said, your sister-in-law wrote this for you. Zhang Xiaohua snatched it over and scolded, Brother Li, why did you only take it out now? Li Jinfeng chuckled and said, good things only appear at the most crucial time. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't wait to open the unsealed letter. There were several pages full of beautiful handwriting. When Zhang Xiaohua read it carefully, it was written in the tone of her parents. It must be the result of a collaboration between the family. The letter contained trivial matters of the family and the village. More importantly, it contained her parents' reminders and longing for the two of them. Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed when she read it. As the saying goes, a letter from home is worth 10,000 pieces of gold. It was true. Zhang Xiaohua finished reading it carefully and kept it carefully in her chest. Just when she was about to speak, Li Jinfeng spoke and said solemnly, also, Zhang Xiaohua, your parents asked me to pass a message to you and your second brother. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, what message can't they say in a letter? Li Jinfeng nodded and said, your parents asked me to personally tell you that if you don't mix well in the city and get bullied, go back to the Guizhuang house. Your parents will always be at home waiting for you to come back. Hearing such simple words, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes immediately blurred. He nodded desperately and said, I know, brother Li. Thank you. When Zhang Xiaohua's mood calmed down a little, he cheerfully said, let's go, brother Li. Let's go find my second brother. He must also want to know about the family. However, as soon as Zhang Xiaohua ran out of the hut, she stopped. She had been to the Misty School once, but it was taken by O Yan through the inner courtyard of the Huanqi villa. She knew that it must be O Yan's special passage, and she might not be able to use it. But if she and Li Jinfeng directly went in through the front door of the Misty Mountain Villa, would the guards let her in? This was really a problem. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua patted the back of her head and smiled. There was a disciple of the Misty School next to her. She could just open her mouth and ask. Zhang Xiaohua moved to the door of He Tianshu's room. The door was not closed and was half open. He Tianshu in the room held his chin with one hand and seemed to be thinking. Zhang Xiaohua went to the door and knocked on the door frame, but it didn't arouse He Tianshu's attention. She had no choice but to go in directly. Only when she was in front of He Tianshu did he wake up. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, Captain He, is this the awareness of a martial arts expert? Isn't it said that after practicing martial arts to a certain extent, one's eyes and ears will be alert? I'm already in front of you, and you only noticed it now. He Tianshu still looked dispirited as he replied, there is such a saying. It is to be able to sense movements within a certain range. However, I am still far from reaching that level. Moreover, you see, this footwork is really hard to understand. I have practiced it many times, but it has no effect. With that said, he wanted to pass the ethereal steps cultivation technique to him. Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Captain He, I'll leave this kind of profound research to you. Once you've comprehended it, you can teach me. When He Tianshu heard this, he took back the technique and asked in puzzlement, then why did you run away? Zhang Xiaohua then told him that she wanted to go to the Misty School to look for her second brother. When He Tianshu heard this, he smiled and said, that's easy. You don't have to worry about the small paths in the inner courtyard. It seems that Mingcue Hall's Hall Master Qin has never walked by himself. I usually go through the front door when I go back. However, I have the Misty School's token. You can go to the guard of Huanqi Manor to get another token. Take that to the side door of Ethereal Manor. It should be able to be used. But I'm not alone. Li Jinfeng and brother Li want to go with me to see my second brother. The Huanqi Manor's token can only be used by one person. You can't bring anyone. Then what should I do? Zhang Xiaohua was depressed. Li Jinfeng had come all the way to his house to take the money that he and his brother had saved. He had even sent a letter to him just to see Zhang Xiaohu. His request wasn't too high, right? How could he not satisfy this request of his? He Tianshu asked, Li Jinfeng. Is he the scholar who came to see you with your second brother last time? Yes. Zhang Xiaohua answered honestly. Well, I happen to want to have a rest. Why don't I take you there? My token can only take one person. After that, He Tianshu stretched and stood up. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He Tianshu went out and greeted Li Jinfeng. Then he took the two people to Ethereal Manor. The three people went out of Huanqi Manor and soon came to the avenue facing Ethereal Manor. Looking at the broad avenue, Zhang Xiaohua felt that things had changed. However, he still took firm steps. Under the archway of Ethereal Manor, it was still solemn. Several young people in neat clothes stood there. There was no one else on the avenue. The guards saw them from afar. However, they were not as alert as when Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu came for the first time. After all, He Tianshu walked in front of the three people. He had walked through the archway many times. When they got close, a guard stopped them as usual and asked with a smile, "Captain He, are you going back to the sect again?" He Tianshu cupped his hands and said, "Brother, this time I'm bringing a friend to visit a brother in the sect." The man nodded and said, "Yes. Captain He, please take out your token and make a registration. I just don't know who this friend is going to see. I've done it before and I know what to do." He Tianshu said with a smile, "My friend is a scholar from the academy in Pingyang City. He wants to visit Zhang Xiaohu. However, I'm not sure which hall this Zhang Xiaohu belongs to." Zhang Xiaohu? Why is this name so familiar? I seem to have heard it somewhere. However, Captain He, you've put me in a difficult position. How can you not know which hall he belongs to? Could it be that he's a child who just joined the sect? He Tianshu explained, "Brother, you're right. Zhang Xiaohu just joined the sect, so I really don't know where he is." He's actually a famous figure in the Jianghu. I'm really ignorant. The guard blushed a little. At this moment, a young guard who could not stand it quietly came over and whispered into his ear, "Captain, you went out for a while and may not know about these things. This Zhang Xiaohu is the person who is being talked about in the sect. He's the one we told you about yesterday. He's almost 20 years old and his martial arts are very sloppy. He didn't rely on his own abilities. He only joined our sect because he knows the manor head of Huanxi Mountain Village and relied on his connections." Oh! The guard suddenly understood and nodded slightly. He then looked at He Tianshu with contempt and said, "Captain He, this brother of yours is very powerful. You have to learn from him. To be honest, look at how miserable you are in the pharmacy hall. You were even sent to Huanxi Mountain Village. Look at you, you didn't manage to establish a relationship with the manor head for such a long time. Instead, someone else took advantage of you." He Tianshu heard this and was stunned on the spot. He asked in confusion, "Brother, what do you mean? We're familiar with each other. Can you make it clear?" That person smiled and declined, "Captain He, you've already said this. Then do you want to make it clear? Wouldn't it be boring if you said too much?" He Tianshu of course would not accept it. He pulled that person to the side and said, "Brother, didn't you just say that you want me to learn? Look, if you don't make it clear, how can I learn?" That person saw that he could not refuse and whispered in He Tianshu's ear, "Captain He, you've been staying in Huanxi Mountain Village all this time. Maybe you don't know these things. I also just came back from outside. As soon as I came back, I heard a few of my brothers chattering. They said that a few days ago, a lucky bastard came to our sect. He borrowed the glory of Manor Lord O and didn't pass the test. However, he was personally accepted into the sect by the sect master. He even became senior martial brother Wen Wenhai's disciple. Think about it, Captain He. This senior Wen Wenhai is the sect leader's direct disciple. He hasn't accepted any disciples yet. Who knows how many disciples are eyeing this position? Say, this Zhang Xiaohu is so old and his martial arts are sloppy. Just based on his relationship with Manor Head O, he got such a big advantage. How can the disciples be convinced?" "Ah!" He Tianshu cried out in surprise. He turned around and saw that Zhang Xiaohua's face was also full of anger. He said, "Brother, how can there be such a rumor? I know about the matter of Zhang Xiaohu entering our Misty School. It doesn't seem like what you're saying." It's not like this." That person also felt strange and said, "You actually know the specific situation? What is going on? However, even if you know the truth now, it's useless. All kinds of rumors have already spread throughout the Misty School. I don't know which version is true and which is false. Maybe what you heard is also false. What I said is absolutely true. I was there at the time." He Tianshu said solemnly. "Come on, brother. It's obvious that you're lying." That person was a little disapproving as he waved his hand and said, "Zhang Xiaohu's entry into the ethereal sect was personally decided by the sect master in the meeting hall. What qualifications do you have to enter the meeting hall? He Tianshu was speechless. That guard's words were really reasonable. If he didn't want to be Zhang Xiaohua's master, how could he have the qualifications to enter the sect leader's office? This kind of thing couldn't be explained clearly to others. He Tianshu could only pat that guard's shoulder and said, "Brother, public opinion can melt gold. Some things aren't as simple as you think. I can't explain the specifics to you. Since you told me the truth just now, I'll give you a piece of advice. Since this matter involves the sect leader, it's naturally better not to talk about it." That guard thoughtfully nodded. He Tianshu then brought Zhang Xiaohua and Li Jinfeng, who had finished their registration, into the archway and walked towards the entrance of the villa. Just as they passed the archway, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but say to He Tianshu, "Captain He, how can they say such nonsense? My second brother was able to enter the Misty School because sect leader O personally agreed to it. How can they say such nonsense?" He Tianshu smiled bitterly and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, in this place where there are only people, there will be jianghu and conflicts. Think about it, being sect leader O's direct disciple is a position that any Misty School disciple would covet. Zhang Xiaohu isn't a disciple that was trained from a young age. His sudden appearance naturally makes people jealous. If your second brother can't even deal with this setback, I believe that sect leader will look down on him. Please add it to your collection, thank you." Chapter 157. Zhang Xiaohua fell silent when she heard that. She only wanted her second brother to enter the Misty School so that he could get rid of the bloodthirsty life of the armed escort agency. She also wanted him to practice martial arts at the same time. She didn't have any other extravagant requests. When Wenhai only accepted her as his disciple out of good intentions and because of their previous relationship, it could be considered a coincidence. However, in the eyes of others, all these good things were just firewood for jealousy. They could only make people lose their heads and reject this shallow village boy from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua deeply felt that the human heart was the most unpredictable thing in the world. Even the Misty School, which was regarded as a sacred place in her heart, couldn't be free from vulgarity. She didn't know if it was right or wrong for her to push her second brother into the teeth of the storm. Just a moment ago, she was still lively and happy. Now, she was a little gloomy. Fortune and misfortune depend on each other. The ancients didn't lie. The attentive Li Jinfeng had long sensed Zhang Xiaohua's abnormal behavior. He smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "Xiaohua, don't worry too much about it. After all, they don't know the secret behind this, so it's inevitable that they won't speculate. It's not uncommon to see groundless accusations in this world. You must learn to be calm. This is the best touchstone for right and wrong, and it's the best way to hone a person's temperament. Once you've experienced enough, you'll naturally learn to be calm. A trivial matter is better than reading 10,000 books. If you're stuck in a pile of old books, who can grow well?" Zhang Xiaohua forced a smile and said, "I know, Brother Li. I'm just a little uncomfortable. I can't believe that doing something like this for my second brother will cause so many people to gossip. If they say this in front of Captain He, who knows what they'll say behind my back." Li Jinfeng smiled and stopped trying to persuade him. This kind of thing depended on one's own understanding. It was useless to say more. Zhang Xiaohua was only a teenager. It was good that he could have such thoughts. If he could see through people's hearts and remain indifferent, it would be strange. When He Tianshu heard this, he chuckled and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you're thinking too much. They're just saying that the grapes are sour because they can't eat them. This kind of matter involves the gang leader, so it's not up to them to criticize. I just want to satisfy my craving. I don't dare to say anything more. Don't worry." As the saying goes, the onlooker sees more clearly than the player is confused. Zhang Xiaohua also knows this truth, but she still can't let it go. Behind the decorated archway was a huge square, facing a main door with carved beams and painted pillars. The door was tightly shut. He Tianshu led the two of them to the side door as he explained, this main door is usually only used by the gang leader or the distinguished guests of the gang. Usually, people in the gang go through the side doors. Li Jinfeng nodded and said, I've already read about these rules in books. I thought they were outdated. In this era where the times keep up with the times, perhaps you won't see them. It's commendable that your gang still retains such an ancient style. He Tianshu smiled and said, Brotherly, you're a scholar, so of course you're full of vigor. We martial artists follow the old rules and are content with the ancient customs. This kind of rule is not uncommon in the martial arts world. After a long time, you'll know. Li Jinfeng cupped his hands and said, I've learned. As the two talked, Zhang Xiaohua was absent-minded. The three of them walked for a while and came to a lush place. He Tianshu stopped and said, This is where the gang leader and the disciples of the elders live. As for where Zhang Xiaohu lives, we'll have to ask to find out. While they were talking, a young man with a face as bright as the moon and an arrogant expression walked out from the door of an abode. He Tianshu quickly went up and cupped his hands and said, I'm He Tianshu from the pharmacy hall. I'm here to visit Brother Wen Wenhai's new disciple, Zhang Xiaohu. May I know where he lives? Brother, can you tell me a little? That person already had an unapproachable expression. After hearing He Tianshu's words, he frowned as if he had seen a fly. He reluctantly returned the greeting and impatiently pointed to the left and said, 50 steps forward. The one with the small tree in front of the door is him. Without waiting for He Tianshu to thank him, he flicked his sleeves and walked away. As he walked, he muttered, another group of snobs. Can't they just practice martial arts? They always want to walk the unorthodox path. Looks like I'll have to find someone to put up a sign over there. For no reason, I've become a guide a few times these past few days. He Tianshu looked at that person's behavior and was also confused. He had asked him for directions in a proper manner and had never been rude. Why was he so cold? The three of them walked forward and saw a small tree in front of a courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua quickly walked forward and knocked on the door. After a while, Zhang Xiaohu's voice came from inside the door, Zhang Xiaohu isn't here. He went to the training ground to practice martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She dug her ears and shouted in surprise, Second brother, I'm Xiaohua. I heard your voice. How did you go to the training ground? Immediately, a surprised voice came from inside, Haha, Xiaohua, wait a moment. The door opened with a sound. The person who stuck his head out was Zhang Xiaohu. When he saw the three of them in front of the door, he was very happy. He quickly let them in and then carefully looked outside. After confirming that there was no one, he closed the door of the courtyard. He Tianshu and the other two stood beside Zhang Xiaohu. Looking at his series of strange actions, they were very puzzled. Zhang Xiaohua even asked, Second brother, what are you doing? How much do you owe him? Zhang Xiaohu turned around and smiled bitterly, sit inside. I'll tell you the details later. This was a rather exquisite small courtyard. There was an open space in the corner where martial arts equipment such as weapons and stone locks were placed. The layout of the courtyard was similar to that of the Huanxi mountain villa, with a stone table and stone stools. Now that the weather was mild, the four of them sat in the courtyard. Zhang Xiaohu poured tea for everyone and then began to talk. Zhang Xiaohua was the first to ask impatiently, Second brother, what's going on? Do you really owe him a debt? Zhang Xiaohu glared at him and said, when did you see your second brother owing someone money? Zhang Xiaohua stuck out his tongue and said, then you were sneaking around just now. It was like the father of Dumbo in our village who owed someone money. Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, I was forced to do this. He Tianshu asked, Zhang Xiaohu, since you can be apprenticed to senior brother Wen, you're the direct disciple of Grand Master O. Who can force you? Zhang Xiaohu said helplessly, it's because I'm the direct disciple of Grand Master O that it's like this. Seeing that everyone was surprised, Zhang Xiaohu took a sip of water and explained, that day in the meeting hall, I was accepted as a disciple by Master. After that, I went through the apprenticeship ceremony and was arranged to live in this small courtyard. He Tianshu interrupted and said, Tsk, there's really a difference in treatment. When I first entered the sect, I lived in a small room with a few people. When I was promoted and became an adult, I was still in a room with 2 people. You just entered the sect and you're already living alone in a small courtyard. It's really a world of difference. No wonder everyone wants to be a direct disciple. Zhang Xiaohu said, Martial Uncle He, please don't mock me. I'd rather live in a room with a few people. Not long after I moved here, a few people came to visit. I didn't understand what was going on, so I warmly welcomed them. However, they didn't say anything and just talked about this and that. I could only accompany them. However, they didn't sit for long before more people came. My small courtyard was full of people the whole day. When more people came, I realized that they were trying to worm their way into being friends with me. They wanted to build a good relationship with me and see if I could give them some benefits. You tell me, isn't it like a chicken talking to a duck? I was able to enter Master's tutelage because of Xiaohua's blessing. I couldn't tell them this, so they just thought I had some secret method and wanted to inquire about it. Many people gave me some jaw-dropping conditions, so I could only decline. However, the more I declined, the more they thought I was in control and the more they pestered me. He Tianshu listened and couldn't help curling his lips. He was also a representative in this misty school. He thought that as long as he was good at martial arts, everything was good. He neglected the ways of the world and only focused on practicing martial arts. Although he was successful in martial arts now, he had become a person that no one loved. That was why he was sent to Huanxi Mountain Villa. Now that he heard other people's methods of currying favor, other than looking up to them, there was nothing else left in his heart. Zhang Xiaohu continued, so, on the second day, when I saw that the crowd was still there, I pretended to go to Master's place to practice martial arts. Only then did I hide out. When everyone left, I secretly came back. These few days, I closed the door and didn't see anyone. When someone knocked on the door anxiously, I was just a cleaner. In any case, they weren't familiar with me, so they couldn't recognize my voice. He had a cunning look on his face. Zhang Xiaohua was relieved and said, so that's how it is. It seems that I was right not to become a disciple of the Misty School. If I had to face these kinds of people every day, I would be annoyed to death. He Tianshu curled his lips again and said disdainfully, if you enter the Misty School, you will also be under my tutelage. If a ghost comes to find you, I will let you be my master. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, it can't be, Captain He. Your martial arts are considered to be one of the best in the sect. How can you mix in with this kind of situation? He Tianshu let out a long breath and said, the human heart is unfathomable. How can you understand the ways of the world? He then acted like he was lazy and disheartened. Li Jinfeng comforted him and said, Captain He, you are thinking too much. Where there are people, there will be snobbery and there will be ways of the world. Without these things, wouldn't the mortal world become a paradise? Zhang Xiaohu also laughed and said, young Master Li is right. Seeing me like this, isn't he Shu also troubled by these kinds of trivial matters and can't wait to hide? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, second brother, in my heart, I have always felt that the Misty School is a paradise. The disciples of the Misty School are all experts like Captain He and Master Wen. Their temperament must be noble and pure. But from what you said, there are also many people who are half-hearted and flattering. That's really unexpected. Li Jinfeng understood Zhang Xiaohua's feelings very well. He patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, Xiaohua's feelings are the same as mine when I first arrived at the academy. The first time I saw a teacher of the academy make a deal with someone for power and money, I was also depressed for a few days. Later on, I understood that teachers are also mortals. Mortals have their own selfish desires. It is normal for them to do some shady business. Zhang Xiaohua also copied He Tianshu and let out a long breath and said, I finally understand what it means to be unsullied out of the mud. If there is no mud, how can there be unsullied nobility? Soon after, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to remember something and asked, "That's right, second brother. When we were at the memorial archway just now, we heard the guards talking about you." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he still smiled bitterly and said, "I know. When I go out on a normal day, I also hear people talking about you. They don't know that they are talking about me, so naturally they don't have any misgivings." It seems that the status of a direct disciple of the big gang leader is really not ordinary. Not only are there many people who want to take advantage of the situation, there are also many people who look down on me, a disciple who came out of nowhere. They think that I am only able to have such good fortune because of others. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua was a little embarrassed and said, "Second brother, you have to blame me for this. I didn't discuss it with you beforehand, so you are now in a dilemma. It's really my fault." Zhang Xiaohu looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a smile and said, "It's okay, Xiaohua. I know that you gave me such a good opportunity to practice martial arts for second brother's sake. Wasn't I so happy at that time that I was dumbfounded? How could I think so much? Second brother can't thank you enough, so how could I blame you? People who look up at the starry sky are not just admiring the beauty of the night sky. Perhaps some people are having nosebleeds. It's better to be down to earth. Moreover, I will walk my own path and let others talk about me. I will walk my own path of martial arts. Who cares about what others think? As long as I work hard and achieve results, these rumors will naturally disappear." He Tianshu clapped and said, "Zhang Xiaohu, what you said is very good. You have great potential. No wonder junior brother Wen took a fancy to you. Martial uncle uses tea in place of wine to congratulate you in advance on your success in the Misty School." Thus, the four of them each raised their teacups and drank it in one gulp. After putting down the teacups, Zhang Xiaohu mysteriously said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, wait here. Second brother will bring you something good." After he finished speaking, he walked into the room. Not long after, he came out with a small booklet and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. He said, "Here, Xiaohua. This is the Nigong Heart Sutra that I especially asked Master for you." Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and immediately stood up from the stone bench. She quickly waved her hands and said, "Second brother, I can't accept this, I can't accept this. Didn't I already take a copy of the Carefree Heart Sutra from the library? I can't take anything from your Misty School. Isn't this asking you to misplace it?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "Master already told me about the Carefree Heart Sutra. Xiaohua, you really are amazing. There are so many Nigong Heart Sutras in the library, so why did you choose that one?" "It's because of this that I asked Master for help. Actually, it's not as you think. There aren't any mistakes to be made. This reckless bull force is just a simple Nigong from another sect. Although you can't find it outside, it's not worth a single cent in the Misty School. Don't worry and just take it." Master gave his approval and I took it from his study. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the thin secret book and asked tentatively, "Second brother, is it really okay to take this reckless bull force?" Zhang Xiaohu raised his hand and threw it into her arms. He laughed and scolded, "If you say it's okay, then it's okay. Look at you. You clearly want to take it, but you're afraid it'll burn your hand." Zhang Xiaohua reached out and caught it. She giggled and said, "I'm just afraid you'll make a mistake. I heard that the rules of the Misty School are very strict. You can't just let anyone practice any Nigong Heart Sutra." He Tianshu also felt a wave of envy. He said, "Direct disciples are really different. Even if I want to see these Heart Sutras, I have to ask the elders. You guys can just casually give them away. It's really unfair." Zhang Xiaohu said, "Martial uncle you're joking. Even if I let you see this Heart Sutra, would you even read it?" He Tianshu didn't say anything and just chuckled. Then, Zhang Xiaohu said to Zhang Xiaohua with concern, "Xiaohua, I heard from Master that this reckless bull force is very easy. Anyone with a bit of understanding can learn it. Also, The Nigong Heart Sutra isn't complicated and the path of cultivation is also very simple. Normally, there won't be any danger of cultivation deviation. I remember that when you were learning fist techniques, you had a photographic memory when you read fist manuals. This thing shouldn't be too difficult for you. Photographic memory when I read fist manuals? He Tianshu was puzzled. Was he talking about Zhang Xiaohua? Zhang Xiaohu continued, this Nigong Heart Sutra was specially chosen for you by Master, so it shouldn't be wrong. However, you haven't practiced any Nigong Heart Sutras before, so you have to be careful. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask Martial Uncle He. She turned her head and said to He Tianshu, please take care of my little brother in the future, Martial Uncle He. He Tianshu smiled and said, there are so many people in the sect looking for you to form a group. Why do you need me? Then, he said, I've heard of this reckless bull force before. It's very easy to learn. I don't think I've heard of anyone suffering from cultivation deviation. However, Zhang Xiaohua, if you have any questions, you can ask me at any time, but I can't teach you this. After all, I'm not practicing the reckless bull force. Seeing that He Tianshu agreed, Zhang Xiaohu was very happy and thanked him repeatedly. Then, He Tianshu asked curiously, Zhang Xiaohu, what Nigong Heart Sutra do you want to practice? Zhang Xiaohu said awkwardly, Martial Uncle He, you also know that I practiced Nigong for a period of time at the Lotus Escort Agency. Master said that the Nigong was too rough and wouldn't be good for the future. He told me to stop a long time ago. Luckily, the time I spent practicing it wasn't long, so it wouldn't affect the practice of new Nigong. He still hasn't decided what Nigong to teach me. He Tianshu was envious again and thought, your master just casually gave away Nigong Heart Sutras from other sections. How can the one you practice be fake? Maybe it's the ethereal divine art. However, how could he say this out loud? He only smiled and said, that's a pity. You probably won't be able to participate in this year's martial arts exhibition. Martial arts exhibition? Zhang Xiaohua, who was immersed in the Nigong Heart Sutra, seemed to have heard something interesting and asked. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, Martial Uncle He, you're joking again. I've just joined the sect. I haven't learned any fist techniques, Nigong, or sword techniques. How can I participate in this exhibition? Wouldn't that be embarrassing my master? Zhang Xiaohua, who had originally wanted to read the Reckless Bull Force manual, immediately became interested. She threw the Nigong Heart Sutra that she couldn't get no matter how hard she tried in the past onto the stone table. She looked at the two people curiously and asked, hurry up and tell me, what is this martial arts exhibition? Chapter 158. Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was worried and smiled at He Tianshu, this disciple has just joined the school and doesn't know much about the sect. Would Martial Uncle He please explain? He Tianshu thought for a moment and said to Zhang Xiaohua, this is some common knowledge in the Jianghu. There's no harm in telling you. Our Misty School's normal disciples are divided into two types, commoner disciples and brocade disciples. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she couldn't help but interrupt, that's not fair, Captain He. Why does the Misty School discriminate? If you have money, you can become a brocade disciple, but if you don't, you can only be a commoner disciple. He Tianshu glared at him in annoyance and said, can you let me finish? Don't you know that it's very impolite to interrupt others? Li Jinfeng looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a smile. After all, when they were young, with his second brother and He Tianshu, who was like a master, Zhang Xiaohua's youthful habits were fully displayed. Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to say anything else. He Tianshu continued, the difference between commoner disciples and brocade disciples isn't whether or not they have money. The disciples of the Misty School are all taken in at the age of 4 or 5. There are specialized people to train them. They don't do business and don't have parents, so where would they get the money? The fundamental difference is in their martial arts cultivation and their contributions to the Misty School. All disciples start off as commoner disciples. Commoner disciples are divided into 10 ranks, and each rank has its own content to cultivate, including fist techniques, sword techniques, palm techniques, and inner force cultivation methods. Commoner disciples are not allowed to skip ranks to cultivate other cultivation methods. Once they have finished cultivating the cultivation methods of their rank, they can proceed to the next rank after being tested by a specialist. In fact, many inner force cultivation methods, palm techniques, and sword techniques are also divided into levels. Commoner disciples also have a corresponding level of cultivation methods for each rank. Only when they advance to the next rank can they have the opportunity to cultivate the lower level of cultivation methods. Zhang Xiaohua found it strange and asked, "Captain He, what does this have to do with the martial arts exhibition?" Just as he finished asking, he seemed to have understood something and muttered to himself, "Could it be that this martial arts exhibition is the test you were talking about?" He Tianxu's face was filled with joy as he said, "Zhang Xiaohua's brain is still very bright. You guessed right, this martial arts exhibition is a test for the disciples' advancement. It's held once a year." Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, "In that case, does this disciple also advance once a year?" He Tianxu smiled and said, "You're right. Those who can enter our Misty School are all talented people. Coupled with the fact that the school teaches students according to their aptitude, most of the disciples can advance once a year." Li Jinfeng suddenly understood and laughed loudly, "Captain He, this sounds like the students in our school who have to take an exam every year. If they pass the exam, they can go to a higher place to study." He Tianxu was stunned and said, "I think it's about the same. After all, the essence of practicing martial arts and studying literature is to improve. If you want to improve, there must be a test standard. Although the standards are different, the essence is the same." At this time, Zhang Xiaohu opened his mouth and asked, "Martial Uncle He, you were talking about commoner disciples just now. What about brocade disciples?" He Tianxu took a sip of tea and continued, "If a commoner disciple learns all 10 levels and passes the test, they can become a brocade disciple. The brocade disciple is divided into 5 levels and is also tested in the martial arts exhibition every year. However, the brocade disciple's cultivation is different from the commoner disciples. Every level of the commoner disciple's cultivation is the same while the brocade disciple's cultivation is taught different cultivation techniques according to their aptitude. For example, if Zhang Xiaohu were to advance to the brocade disciple's level, he would have a unique interest or insight in fist techniques and may cultivate the ethereal sect's high-level fist techniques." Li Jinfeng nodded and said, "The ancients said that there is no limit to learning, but there is a limit to life. Only those who specialize in what they learn can have impressive achievements. The embroidered gown disciples of your esteemed sect probably specialize in one skill based on their own strengths." He Tianxu smiled and said, "It's better to study literature. When you open your mouth, you speak in a literary style and make sense. Perhaps this is the reason why the predecessors of my sect set these rules. However, there are still some differences between the examinations of the brocade disciples and the commoner disciples. Although the commoner disciples are tested through a martial arts competition, the winner will undoubtedly be promoted. However, if the loser has enough power and obtains the approval of the judge, they can also be promoted. Brocade disciples are the opposite. The standards are stricter. Even if they win the martial arts test, if they don't receive the judge's approval, they can't advance." Then, he said with a strange tone, "Also, there is no limit to the number of times a brocade disciple can take the test. As long as you don't pass the test, you have to keep taking the test until you pass. If you can't pass the test, you can't advance, no matter how many years you cultivate." At this time, He Tianxu felt that Zhang Xiaohua was staring at him. He asked curiously, "Zhang Xiaohua, why are you looking at me? Is there something on my face?" Zhang Xiaohua giggled and said, "I want to know what rank captain he is now." He Tianxu raised his eyebrows and said with a serious face, "Well, Zhang Xiaohua, what I just told you is common knowledge in the Misty School. Many people in the martial arts world know about it, so it's fine to say it. As for what rank I am, it involves the secrets of the Misty School. I can't casually reveal it to you. Don't ask too much about it, it's not good for your reputation." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know much about the Misty School. She quickly said, "Okay, I understand. Captain He, please continue." He Tianshu said, "It's good that you understand. However, there's nothing else to say." Li Jinfeng asked, "Then, Captain He, can you tell us how to differentiate commoner disciples and brocade disciples? I seem to have heard that the gangs in the martial arts world use the color of their clothes to differentiate their status. They also use things like cuff logos to indicate their rank." When He Tianshu heard this, he snorted and said, "This method is extremely crude. I think the Misty School did this a long time ago, but it was abolished later." Zhang Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued. She quickly asked, "Why is that? Isn't this pretty good?" He Tianshu said, "First of all, think about it. The Misty School is such a big gang. How many disciples do we have, and what are their ranks? If every rank has to be marked with a different color of clothes, wouldn't the entire gang be colorful? What kind of prestigious sect is this? It's more like the Pear Garden. Moreover, if the cuff logos are marked, wouldn't it be special? This is too different from the standardization that the Misty School advocates. Actually, there's another point." He Tianshu pretended to be mysterious and said in a low voice, "In my opinion, if every piece of clothing is marked, the cost is too high. Although the gang is rich, many times, the landlord doesn't have any extra money. It's better to spend according to one's income. Martial power and financial resources are the two main factors for a gang's development. We can't waste money on trivial matters, right?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt a little sympathetic. She clapped her hands and said, "Captain He, I agree with you. Money should be used where it's needed." The other two also understood. However, He Tianshu continued, "Moreover, if a person's strength can be seen from their clothes, then in the eyes of the Misty School, there will be a clear difference in status. It's not conducive to harmony and unity. It's also very easy to form small groups, which is not conducive to the competition and development of the disciples. The most important thing is, think about it. For the enemies of the Misty School, if they can see your strength from your clothes, then why would they spend so much effort looking for information? If you wear different clothes and have different logos on your clothes, then they can tell what your cultivation level is and how strong you are. They will naturally send people stronger than you to cause trouble for you. Won't you always be under their control, without any privacy?" Everyone listened and nodded. He Tianshu said proudly, "Therefore, the ancestors of the Misty School were very wise to abolish this bad habit of clothing. Ordinary disciples' clothes are more or less the same." Zhang Xiaohua asked again, "Then, Captain He, when is this year's martial arts exhibition?" He Tianshu said, "Probably a month later. This is a grand occasion for our Misty School. I'm really looking forward to it." Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to ask, "Captain He, are you ready?" He Tianshu smiled proudly and said, "I wasn't confident at first, but I just learned ethereal steps." "I have." Then, he realized something and said, "This is a secret of the Misty School. It's not good to ask too much." Zhang Xiaohua smiled embarrassedly and said, "Then, when the time comes, can I come and take a look?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Huanxi Villa is a branch of the Misty School. Usually, you can enter the Misty School with the villa's token. The security will be tight, but you should be able to enter." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was very happy and asked again, "Then, can I participate in this martial arts exhibition?" He Tianshu frowned and said, "This martial arts exhibition is specially used to test the disciples of our Misty School." "What are you doing?" "Oh, right, I heard that there were people from Huanxi Villa and Lotus Flower Escort Agency participating. It's been a long time, and I was still young at that time, so I vaguely remember it. However, there are no outsiders participating now." Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Why is that? Then how can I participate?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "How would I know? If you want to participate, you can go back and ask Villa Lord O." Zhang Xiaohua asked with concern, "Xiaohua, do you really want to participate? Do you only know that fist technique?" You've never practiced internal energy? Zhang Xiaohua looked at her second brother and comforted him with a smile. Second brother, I'm just saying. I'm just here to watch the fun. Besides, my fist technique is not bad. Last time, I even taught a group of street ruffians a lesson. Everyone smiled bitterly. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. This Zhang Xiaohua really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, if he didn't have this spirit, could he still be called a young man? Even if he was a young man from the countryside. The three of them chatted with Zhang Xiaohua for a while before they bid farewell and left. Zhang Xiaohua carefully hid the Reckless Bull Force manual in her bosom. Only then did she bid farewell to her second brother, who was still looking at her reluctantly when he walked her to the door. Although she had already started practicing the Carefree Heart Sutra, her talent was limited and she didn't make any progress. Moreover, this Reckless Bull Force manual was something that her second brother had painstakingly asked for from great swordsman Wen. It carried a strong sense of kinship with Zhang Xiaohua. There was no reason for Zhang Xiaohua not to cherish it. He Tianshu brought them to the decorated archway and didn't go out with them. He had some matters to attend to in the sect, so he naturally had to go to the pharmacy. Zhang Xiaohua and Li Jinfeng bid farewell to He Tianshu and went to the Gallop carriage company together. Li Jinfeng was a weak scholar, unlike Zhang Xiaohua who was full of energy and careful with money. Naturally, he took the carriage. By the time Zhang Xiaohua sent Li Jinfeng off and returned to Huanxi Mountain Villa, it was already noon. There wasn't a single person in the medicinal field. The Misty School's martial arts exhibition was just around the corner. This was a matter that concerned the future of the disciples. Even the captain, He Tianshu, was concerned about it, let alone Nye Xiao, and the others. It was obvious that they spent less time in the medicinal field. Fortunately, the herbs in the medicinal field were still growing healthily. Other than weeding and other chores, it wasn't troublesome. Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind doing more work. Zhang Xiaohua went down to the medicinal field and cleaned it up in a short time. Then, she sat down on the ridge and carefully took out the Reckless Bull Force manual that Zhang Xiaohu gave her. This manual was called Reckless Bull Force, and it was a very thin manual. No matter what, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't a beginner. After looking through it, she had a rough idea of what to do. This Reckless Bull Force was similar to the method that Zhang Xiaohu had told her before. The path of the internal energy in the body was also very simple. Compared to the first layer of the Carefree Heart Sutra, it was much worse. It was indeed the easiest internal energy cultivation method in the world of martial arts. After reading the Reckless Bull Force manual, Zhang Xiaohua silently recited it in her heart and compared it with the manual. When she felt that there were no mistakes, she followed the manual's instructions and sat down cross-legged with her palms facing the sky. She closed her eyes and calmed her heart. Zhang Xiaohua had done this countless times before, so she was very familiar with it now. Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes and imagined a warm current flowing into her forehead. Then, she swallowed it with her jade. She repeated this over and over again. Even when Zhang Xiaohua's forehead was covered in sweat and her heart was vexed, she still didn't feel any qi. For no reason, Zhang Xiaohua felt a wave of irritation. She really swallowed and opened her eyes. She looked at the healthy herbs in front of her and then looked at the barren medicinal field without sprouts. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, am I the seed that won't sprout? Do I not have a chance to shine? Zhang Xiaohua smiled wryly and mocked herself. Perhaps I really am stupid. Zhang Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the sky. There was still time before lunch, so she calmed herself down and sat down cross-legged again. She closed her eyes and continued the 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua still hadn't shaken off the failure of the Reckless Bull Force, so he couldn't help but breathe quickly and find it difficult to walk. However, even if Zhang Xiaohua was stupid, he didn't lack tenacity. He had a heart that would only grow braver when faced with setbacks. Not long after, he gradually entered a strange state. His 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing gradually matched the frequency at night. Bit by bit, it moved Zhang Xiaohua's entire body. The pores on his body gradually opened. Naturally, Zhang Xiaohua used the method in the Heart Sutra to sense the yuan qi of the world outside. In the beginning, he didn't feel anything, but Zhang Xiaohua wasn't discouraged. Or it could be said that he didn't feel any joy or sorrow. His mind was calm and he didn't feel discouraged. He only knew that the outside world was endless emptiness. Only by searching endlessly could there be a result. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly sensed a trace of the yuan qi of the world that was similar to what was described in the Heart Sutra. He was delighted and was about to use his Heart Sutra to absorb it, but because his mind was distracted, he couldn't sense it anymore. Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes, but there was a smile on his face. Even though he failed to absorb it for the first time, to Zhang Xiaohua who hadn't sensed the yuan qi of the world, it was a huge improvement. A milestone in progress. He, Zhang Xiaohua, finally had a sense of qi. Zhang Xiaohua was about to circulate his energy again, but when he saw the color of the sky, he couldn't help but be shocked. "Io!" He immediately jumped up from the ground. Noon had already passed, but he didn't know that there was still lunch to eat. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua slowly walked back with a few buns in his hand and a bun in his mouth. Zhang Xiaohua's meal was still the same as before. He didn't have someone to send him off like Elder Yu, so naturally, no one would wait for him. That table of first-class food also turned cold and was taken away under the gazes of Ma Jing and the others. Waiting for Zhang Xiaohua were only a few cold buns. When Zhang Xiaohua found out that Nie Xiao, and the others hadn't gone to eat, he couldn't help but be shocked. If he had gone earlier, wouldn't he have enjoyed an entire table of delicious food by himself? Zhang Xiaohua, who was currently filling his stomach, still hadn't forgotten the feeling he had just experienced. He couldn't resist the urge to try again, so he returned to the medicinal field while eating his buns. Sitting back down on the ridge, Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. The experience just now gave him a feeling that to draw qi into one's body, one must have a calm state of mind. It must be as calm as an ancient well to be able to succeed. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua felt that his surroundings were slowly calming down. He knew that it was time. Only then did he sit down in a cross-legged position and circulate the 9 shallow and 1 deep technique. Sure enough, this time, he smoothly entered a tranquil state. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua began to use the Heart Sutra again to sense the yuan qi of heaven and earth in the outside world. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua had a new feeling. He felt that his consciousness was swimming around the outside world like a fish, as if it was looking for delicious food. Zhang Xiaohua liked this feeling very much. It was a kind of searching, a kind of freedom to soar. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Xiaohua once again felt a trace of yuan qi of heaven and earth. This time, he didn't feel particularly happy, as if this was what he had expected. He followed the instructions of the Heart Sutra and his perception turned into a fish, guiding the yuan qi towards himself. That yuan qi was originally going downwards, but with the guidance of Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness, it immediately changed direction and slowly floated towards Zhang Xiaohua. When it came close, the yuan qi seemed to be attracted by something and quickly rushed into Zhang Xiaohua's body. It was unknown which pores it passed through, but Zhang Xiaohua didn't have such thoughts. He was still waiting for the yuan qi of heaven and earth to circulate in his body so that he could explore the mysteries of his inner force cultivation method. Unfortunately, when the yuan qi entered his body, it wasn't as described in the Heart Sutra. Zhang Xiaohua actually couldn't feel where it went. Chapter 159. After sensing his body for a while, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but want to cry. How could he bully people like this? It was fine if his aptitude was poor, but he could not sense the endless heaven and earth yuan qi in the world like what was mentioned in the Carefree Heart Sutra. He had worked so hard for such a long time and finally managed to draw the yuan qi into his body today. How could this trace of yuan qi suddenly disappear? It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua did not have another pair of eyes in his body, so he naturally could not search for it. The only thing he could do was try again. With his first success, he could be considered to have accumulated experience. In the future, he would be familiar with sensing the Yuan Qi. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua found another trace of Yuan Qi. It also came down, and with a pull from Zhang Xiaohua, it changed sides and fell into the embrace of Zhang Xiaohua. However, this door was as deep as the sea. After entering Zhang Xiaohua's body, it disappeared without a trace. After doing this a few times, Zhang Xiaohua no longer felt resentful. The heaven and earth Yuan Qi was outside his body and not his. As long as he drew the Yuan Qi into his body, then it was surnamed Zhang. Who cared where it was? As long as it did not run out, there would be a day when he would discover it. Moreover, the Carefree Heart Sutra did not mention how Yuan Qi came out. Looking at He Tianshu and the rest's cultivation, he had never heard of inner strength running out on its own. Could it be that it would be released by him? Speaking of which, it was strange. Zhang Xiaohua just sat cross-legged on the ridge of the medicinal field and drew a lot of heaven and earth Yuan Qi into his body in just one afternoon. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was also a little puzzled. Although he had just started drawing Yuan Qi into his body, he could still draw Yuan Qi, right? Why couldn't he sense the Yuan Qi that filled the world? Why was it all strand by strand? And it all came down from above. It was not as the Carefree Heart Sutra said, that it was scattered between heaven and earth. Could it be that He Tianshu and the others' internal energy was cultivated from the outside like this? With a belly full of questions, Zhang Xiaohua returned to the small courtyard. Very naturally, he went to knock on He Tianshu's door. He Tianshu had already returned from the pharmacy and was studying ethereal steps in his room. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua enter the room, he smiled and asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, is there a problem with practicing reckless bull force?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "Captain He, you're really a deity. You're really good at divination." He Tianshu waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. Although I was young back then, when I received my first internal energy cultivation method, I was just like you now. I was in a hurry to cultivate and accidentally made a mistake. If it weren't for my senior and junior brothers discovering it early, I would have been crippled. I've heard of your reckless bull force before. It's easy to understand, and the circulation path is simple. It's suitable for people like you who have patience and don't have anyone guiding them." Then, he raised his eyebrows and giggled, "Have you been busy all afternoon? How's your practice of reckless bull force?" Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said in a small voice, "I don't feel anything. I still can't feel the qi." He Tianshu laughed and said, "It's okay. The feeling of qi is related to each person's talent. You can't be discouraged and try more. Maybe you'll be able to feel it soon. Back then, I also used 2 whole days to feel the qi. How long does the fastest method take?" Zhang Xiaohua was curious. "Immediately." He Tianshu answered without hesitation. "Ah." Zhang Xiaohua's mouth opened so wide that a duck egg could be stuffed in. "That's right. Immediately." He Tianshu smiled and replied, "There are countless geniuses in this world. From what I remember back then, very few people can immediately feel the qi. Of course, most people can only feel it after 1 or 2 days." Zhang Xiaohua continued to ask, "Then, Captain He, is there anyone who can't feel the qi?" He Tianshu frowned and said, "I don't remember anyone like that. It's still the same old saying. The people that I picked out from Misty School are all talented and intelligent people. Very few of them can feel the qi after 3 or 4 days." Zhang Xiaohua's heart sank. She then asked, "Then, Captain He, do you feel the qi from the outside world in wisps or lumps?" When He Tianshu heard this, he was stunned. He then laughed and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you really know how to joke. There's no real qi in the outside world. The feeling of qi is just a hypothesis. I believe that the reckless bull force also has the meaning of a hypothesis. Pretend that there's qi flowing into your body from your forehead. That's the embryonic form of internal strength. Internal strength or internal strength, you have to move the qi yourself to open up the acupuncture points in your body and circulate it in your meridians. Every time it circulates, it will increase a little. This is the essence of increasing internal strength. Of course, there are also some medicine that can increase internal strength. But I've never heard of being able to absorb qi from outside the body. If that's the case, we can just absorb qi from outside the body every day. Why do we have to sit cross-legged and cultivate our internal strength? When he saw Zhang Xiaohua's puzzled face, He Tianshu explained, also, the meridians in the human body are the containers for internal strength. The size of the container determines the amount of internal strength. We cultivate internal strength for two reasons. On one hand, we need to increase our internal strength. On the other hand, we need to expand our meridians. Only when both are increased can it be considered a high-level internal strength cultivation method. Although your reckless bull force is easy to learn, the circulation path is very simple. Every time you circulate it, the increase in your internal strength is limited. Also, this cultivation method has very little effect on expanding your meridians. That's why there are very few people who suffer from qi deviation. But Zhang Xiaohua was a little anxious and said, I can't feel internal strength from outside the body. Then how can I generate internal strength in my body? He Tianshu smiled and said, the appearance is born from the heart. The generation of internal strength is like this. As long as you have a sense of qi, the meridians in your body will naturally generate internal strength. It will be warm, and if you circulate it according to the cultivation method, the internal strength will follow your thoughts and flow in your meridians like a little mouse. If you cultivate for a long time, the mouse will naturally grow. He Tianshu added on as if it was a matter of fact. Warm flow. Flow in my meridians? Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. In the past, when she cultivated the Big Dipper fist, there was a warm flow. She guessed that was internal strength. However, as for the meridians, Zhang Xiaohua thought about the cultivation method in the Carefree Heart Sutra. It didn't seem to be the same as the warm flow. So she asked again, Captain He, then is the movement of internal strength in the meridians the same? He Tianshu smiled and said, of course it's not the same. The difference in every cultivation method is in the use of the meridians and the movement of internal strength. If the ethereal divine art is the same as your reckless bull strength, then can it still be called the ethereal divine art? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. However, she still didn't give up and asked, Captain He, is what you said true? Internal strength can't be absorbed from the outside world? He Tianshu said resolutely and decisively, definitely, definitely, definitely. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. When she cultivated the Carefree Heart Sutra, she really felt the yuan qi of heaven and earth. She also guided it into her body. What was going on? She originally wanted to ask He Tianshu about the disappearance of the yuan qi in her body. Now that she had completely overturned her question about the feeling of qi, she might as well not ask. He Tianshu saw Zhang Xiaohua's discouraged appearance and went forward to pat him on the shoulder, saying, Zhang Xiaohua, failure is the mother of success. You have to be unafraid of hardship, sacrifice, and sweat. If you can't get the feeling of qi in a day, then use 2 days. If 2 days aren't enough, then use 3 days. If you really can't get it after 1 or 2 months, then it's fine. We don't cultivate inner strength cultivation methods and change to outer strength cultivation methods. Look at our Misty School's stone cow. They don't cultivate inner strength cultivation methods, but aren't they still very powerful? Zhang Xiaohua didn't make any excuses and casually looked at He Tianshu's table. He Tianshu looked at his appearance and said awkwardly, the second layer of the ethereal steps is still a bit difficult. I've looked at it, but I still don't understand it. You say, it's clearly a footwork technique, but there are some parts that I don't understand. It's simply inconceivable. I really don't know how Big Sect Leader and the others managed to cultivate it. Don't be anxious. Once I understand it, I'll immediately tell you. You should first learn your reckless bull's strength and find the feeling of qi. Zhang Xiaohua also lost interest and said, "Okay, team leader he. You look at it first. I'll go back and think about it." After saying this, Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head and walked out. He originally thought that he would be able to find a satisfactory answer from He Tianshu, but now, Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused. What was going on? What He Tianshu said was completely different from the Carefree Heart Sutra that he cultivated. Could he have cultivated it wrongly? Behind him, He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's back that was filled with thoughts and was secretly worried for him. The path of inner force cultivation techniques had always been about aptitude. If one couldn't find the feeling of qi for a long time, then there was no way to produce inner force, much less channel it and forge the meridians. If Zhang Xiaohua could forget his fist technique to that extent, then his inner force wouldn't be able to escape the same fate. Immediately after, He Tianshu recalled Zhang Xiaohua's intelligence when learning ethereal steps. However, ethereal steps Qigong also required inner strength as a foundation. Without inner strength, no matter how good one's technique was, it would be useless without any foundation. Thinking of this, He Tianshu could only let out a long sigh. Rousing his spirits, he began to study the ethereal steps. Zhang Xiaohua returned to the small house, feeling unwilling to give up. He took out the Carefree Heart Sutra again and carefully read through the first level of the cultivation technique. After confirming that there were no mistakes in his memory, he closed the secret manual and pondered in his heart. The Heart Sutra clearly stated that the heaven and earth was filled with endless yuan qi. The amount of yuan qi absorbed into the body depended on the depth of the cultivator's skills. It wasn't like his perception today where the yuan qi of heaven and earth was in threads. If he didn't have the ability to sense yuan qi, then it was fine. Perhaps he couldn't recognize the endless yuan qi when facing it. But now that he could sense it, then naturally he would be able to sense a large amount of yuan qi. It couldn't be that he could sense some and not some, right? Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He had just read the first level of the Carefree Heart Sutra. It might not be recorded, but it couldn't be that there were no records of the cultivation technique after that. So he hurriedly opened the Carefree Heart Sutra again. But what made Zhang Xiaohua disappointed was that after he carefully read from beginning to end, he still couldn't find any answers from this secret manual. The other 10 levels of the cultivation technique also talked about the path of cultivation and the description of realms. It seemed that only the first level slightly touched on the yuan qi of heaven and earth. However, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't without any gains. At the end of the Carefree Heart Sutra, it talked about another method of absorbing the yuan qi of heaven and earth. This method wasn't used to absorb the yuan qi of heaven and earth in a gaseous state, but a solid yuan qi of heaven and earth called a yuan stone. According to the records of the Carefree Heart Sutra, although the yuan qi of heaven and earth permeated the entire world, but the density of the yuan qi in different places was different. In some special places, the yuan qi of heaven and earth was shockingly dense. After a long time, it would condense into a yuan stone. According to the time it took to form the yuan stone also came in different sizes. The small ones were like broad beans, while the large ones were like walnuts. These yuan stones were the crystallization of the yuan qi and naturally contained a lot of yuan qi. It could be absorbed by the cultivator for a long time. After the yuan stone was absorbed, it would slowly shrink until it completely disappeared. Zhang Xiaohua was very happy and immediately committed this method to memory. However, the last sentence of the method poured cold water on his head. This method could only be used after the cultivation of the Carefree Heart Sutra to the 9th level. Otherwise, large amounts of yuan qi of heaven and earth would surge into the cultivator's body and cause the cultivator's weak meridians to explode, causing the cultivator to explode and die. Zhang Xiaohua pursed his lips and put the Carefree Heart Sutra back into his clothes. He thought to himself that it was indeed useless again. Not to mention what the yuan stone looked like and where he could find it. Just looking at the current situation, he hadn't even entered the first level. Who knew when he would be able to cultivate to the 9th level? Even if he had the yuan stone, he wouldn't dare to absorb it. At night, Zhang Xiaohua went to the forest as usual. First, he practiced his fist techniques, then his sword techniques and his qinggong. Needless to say, there was no need to talk about his fist technique and sword technique. His qinggong was also becoming more and more proficient. Although he did not have internal energy as a foundation, Zhang Xiaohua's current figure was also very different from before. He used his movement technique to run in the forest, and it actually looked like he was using qinggong. However, he could not run high, so it was a waste of his elegant spirit. After doing his homework, Zhang Xiaohua picked a spot under a tree and sat down cross-legged confidently. He circulated the inner strength of the Carefree Heart Sutra and prepared to sense the Yuan Qi in the outside world and draw it into his body. However, after meditating for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua's senses also roamed outside for a long time, but he still couldn't find any Yuan Qi. Even the trace of Yuan Qi that he had felt in the afternoon was nowhere to be found. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohua stood up again and patted the dust off his body. What was going on? Could it be that there was no Yuan Qi at night? Zhang Xiaohua was depressed. He was just practicing the Carefree Heart Sutra. Why was there so much trouble? It was either something was wrong here or there. It wasn't easy to find the Yuan Qi, but it disappeared in the afternoon. Where was he going to find it? Actually, he didn't think about it. In this world, learning and cultivation was best if there was someone to guide you. Although the secret manual was the essence of the theory, it recorded other people's experiences. Everyone was different, and there would definitely be differences in cultivation. These differences needed practical experience to make up for. Otherwise, why would it be said that great teachers produce great disciples? Although there were self-taught talents, they were just a drop in the ocean. However, the idea of, where should I find the missing Yuan Qi reminded Zhang Xiaohua. Didn't he feel the Yuan Qi for the first time in the medicinal field at noon? Since he couldn't find it in the forest at night, he might as well try the medicinal field. Since there was still some time before midnight, he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't be able to make it back. Under the moonlight, the medicinal field was exceptionally quiet. If there wasn't a gentle breeze, the herbs swaying in the wind could be seen clearly under the moonlight. It was a wonderful night, but he did not know how lucky Zhang Xiaohua was. Zhang Xiaohua first sat on the ridge of the field, and didn't immediately practice 9 shallow and 1 deep. This was progress. The secret manual didn't say that one needed to calm down before practicing. Without the guidance of a master, one could only gain this experience through trial and error. When Zhang Xiaohua felt that he was ready, he then used the breathing method of the Carefree Heart Sutra to slowly adjust his breathing frequency and gradually enter the state of emptiness. When Zhang Xiaohua released his perception, he couldn't help but be shocked. He almost lost his mind and lost his state of mind. Why? As soon as Zhang Xiaohua released his fish-like perception, he discovered that there was a lot of Yuan Qi of heaven and earth outside. Wisps of Yuan Qi fell from the sky like rain, more than 5 times more than during the day. Although it was very different from the description in the Carefree Heart Sutra, it was still a lot more than before. Zhang Xiaohua happily used the method of the Heart Sutra to guide the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth. Strangely enough, as soon as Zhang Xiaohua guided the first wisp of Yuan Qi into his body, the other Yuan Qi seemed to have heard the bugle horn and all rushed to him. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. Previously, he thought that the guiding of Yuan Qi was like guiding wisps of Yuan Qi in the daytime. That would take too long to cultivate one's inner strength. Now that he looked at it, under the condition of abundant Yuan Qi, as long as he guided the first wisp of Yuan Qi, the other wisps of Yuan Qi would follow. This was the real trick. It seemed that he didn't take the wrong path. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was extremely happy. The 100,000 pores on his body were like babies with mouths, competing to suck in the limited amount of Yuan Qi of heaven and earth. The Yuan Qi also seemed to be endless. It was just that the amount was very small each time, but the advantage was that it was endless. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua, who was overjoyed, completely forgot about time in this unexpected state. How could he still know what time it was? There seemed to be a faint smile on his face that was devoid of joy or sorrow. Just as that smile appeared, it immediately froze on his face. The pitiful Zhang Xiaohua immediately fell into a dream that a certain senior from the Misty School would be extremely envious of. In his dream, Zhang Xiaohua was still sitting cross-legged. The special breathing method was still the same, and the gurgling stream of yuan qi was still flowing into his body. Only, that flickering in his dream, under the stimulation of the 9 shallow and 1 deep, was once again deeply magnified. An invisible frequency was emitted from Zhang Xiaohua's body, coinciding with the stars in the night sky. Chapter 160. Just as the twinkle in Zhang Xiaohua's dream resonated with the stars in the night sky, the endless starry sky seemed to have received a call and instantly swarmed over, as if passing through time and space. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua's body was surrounded by countless amounts of star power. The 100,000 pores all over his body that were crying for food opened up as if they had seen a delicacy and tasted it to their heart's content. After the star power and yuan qi were absorbed into the body by the pores, they were so small that they could not be sensed. In his dream, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously circulated the first level of the Carefree Heart Sutra, pushing them to flow in the meridians according to the circulation route. Just like before, the astral energy was slowly refined into pure yuan qi, and the yuan qi absorbed along with it fused with the yuan qi formed by the astral energy and was refined by the twinkle, leaving behind an even purer yuan qi. This pure yuan qi was stored in Zhang Xiaohua's middle dantian. However, even though there was a lot of astral energy and yuan qi entering Zhang Xiaohua's body, Zhang Xiaohua's meridians were purified to a shocking degree under the effect of the twinkle. 10 halts were gone, and in the end, only a tiny bit of yuan qi was left. However, the purity of that yuan qi was terrifying. Everything was carried out quietly without Zhang Xiaohua's awareness. However, the pure yuan qi was too little, so little that Zhang Xiaohua was unable to sense it. Until the next morning, when the sun rose, Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes and shook off his clothes that were soaked with dew. However, he still did not know what he had gained from his busy night. Zhang Xiaohua looked around and remembered what happened yesterday. He could not help but smile bitterly and stand up to stretch a little. Although he had meditated through the night, his body did not feel any discomfort. In fact, he felt refreshed and not sleepy at all. He was even more energetic than when he was lying on the Kong bed. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but think to himself, why not sleep in the future and sell the Kong bed in the hut for money so that he could meditate every day? It was still early and the sun had just peeked out from the horizon. Zhang Xiaohua swallowed at the rising sun and another warm current entered his body. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something, but he could not figure it out clearly. He tilted his head in thought for a while, but still could not figure it out, so he threw it to the back of his mind. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to practice the fist of the North Star by the herb field, but unfortunately, there were no trees around the herb field. Zhang Xiaohua had always avoided people when practicing his fist, and now that he was suddenly practicing in an open area, he was not used to it was a little uncomfortable. Thus, he decided to return to the forest to practice his fist and sword arts. But just as he walked to the edge of the forest, he thought of another matter. His fist art would have to be seen by others sooner or later. Not to mention that he only knew this fist art, regardless of whether it was in front of others or behind others, his fist art was still the fist of the North Star. Although it was made up of different fist arts, it was still a fist art. In the future, there was no need to avoid people. Besides, he still wanted to participate in the Misty School's martial arts exhibition. If he did not use the fist of the North Star, what else could he use? He might as well practice his fist art openly and not care about what others said. As for Elder Yu's sword art, he was instructed not to let others see it when he was teaching it. Thus, he could only avoid people when he practiced his sword art. Just as he was thinking, Zhang Xiaohua walked into the forest. Suddenly, he heard a pada sound. It was the sound of a person falling down. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. It was broad daylight, could it be that someone was doing something bad in the forest? Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua executed the ethereal steps and quickly walked into the depths of the forest. Who knew that just as Zhang Xiaohua took a few steps, he heard the sound coming from the depths of the forest. A series of curses was heard. XXX, why is the ethereal steps so difficult? This footwork is obviously wrong. That voice was very familiar. It was Zhang Xiaohua's cheap master, He Tianshu. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be delighted. Captain He, why are you up so early? When Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the scene, He Tianshu had just climbed up from the ground and was patting the dust off his body. With an awkward expression, he said, Zhang Xiaohua? Why are you here? Why didn't I hear your footsteps? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I usually practice my fist art in the forest. Just now, I heard a strange sound, so I came over to take a look. Perhaps Captain He was too focused on practicing and didn't hear my footsteps. He Tianshu raised his eyebrows. Strange sound. I also heard it just now. It seems like a little bird kicked the tree branch and broke it. Don't bother about it. Zhang Xiaohua found it funny and said, I think so. But, why is Captain He up so early today? He Tianshu took out a few pieces of paper from his bosom and casually waved it around, saying, Isn't this the Ethereal Steps manual? After you left yesterday, I took a careful look at it, but I still couldn't figure out how to use this footwork. I didn't even sleep well, so I came here to practice before dawn. However, this footwork is just as I thought. There are many places that I can't use. I don't know if these are written wrongly. Not only did Zhang Xiaohua not believe his words, even He Tianshu himself didn't sound very confident. Perhaps he was trying to find an excuse for the little bird that broke the tree branch. Zhang Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued as she asked, Captain He, is it really that magical? Even you can't understand it? You are the god in my heart. You must continue to work hard and don't disappoint me. He Tianshu curled his lips and said, It's true. Don't doubt me. Sigh, if only I was Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, Why is it my second brother? He Tianshu said enviously, If I were Zhang Xiaohu, I would definitely take this Ethereal Steps manual to his master and he would definitely tell me the secret of this place. You don't understand, Zhang Xiaohua. There's a world of difference between fumbling around and having a master guiding you. As the saying goes, the predecessor plants the tree, the successor enjoys the shade. That's the logic behind it. Zhang Xiaohua nodded her head like a chick pecking at rice. What he said was true. If her master was by her side, she wouldn't have to ponder so hard. She could just casually ask and get the answer. Wouldn't that be great? However, if she acknowledged this master, her second brother would still have to live a precarious life in the escort agency. In comparison, Zhang Xiaohua was still satisfied with the current outcome. Fighting with the heavens was endless joy. Fighting with the earth was endless joy. Wouldn't it be equally endless joy if she fought with herself? Although that was the case, it was fine to have restless thoughts. However, the footwork still had to be pondered. He Tianshu said to Zhang Xiaohua, practice your fist technique by the side. Don't disturb me. I'll give it another try. I don't believe that with my talent of sensing qi in 2 days back then, it's impossible for me to not understand this basic footwork. With that said, he waved his hand and gestured for Zhang Xiaohua to go about her own business. He then looked at the few thin pages of paper. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and knew that she couldn't be of any help again. She prepared to turn and leave. But at that moment, He Tianshu looked at the footwork while walking on the spot. Involuntarily, he attracted Zhang Xiaohua's gaze. He had already learned the first level of ethereal steps. He was only lacking the basic inner strength and was unable to use it. He had never heard of this footwork used in a martial arts competition. When He Tianshu used it, it naturally attracted his attention. He wanted to see the true face of the Misty School's signature technique. He saw He Tianshu looking at the footwork while stepping to the left and right in a narrow space. Sometimes, he would step on the same spot, and sometimes he would take a big step far away. It left Zhang Xiaohua baffled. As she watched, He Tianshu's 2 feet stepped on the same spot. He Tianshu lost his balance and was about to fall. Thankfully, He Tianshu seemed to be prepared. His body swayed and he stepped on the ground beside him, ending the footwork practice. Zhang Xiaohua knew that He Tianshu probably didn't know how to use it in this place, resulting in his fall. Just as she was thinking, He Tianshu persevered and began practicing again. This time, Zhang Xiaohua focused and carefully looked at He Tianshu's footwork. It was very complicated. Even with Zhang Xiaohua's somewhat enlightened mind, she could only remember about 30 to 40% of it. Similarly, when he reached the same spot, He Tianshu made another mistake and nearly fell. Pooey! He Tianshu spat on the ground and carefully kept the paper in his hand. He said fiercely, "I don't believe that I can't teach you a lesson." Only then did he raise his head and see Zhang Xiaohua watching by the side. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Zhang Xiaohua, why aren't you practicing your boxing?" Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Captain He, I saw that you were practicing quite well. Why don't I learn a little from you?" He Tianshu said unhappily, "I haven't practiced it yet. How can I teach you? You'd better wait a little longer." Right after he said that, He Tianshu suddenly changed his mind and said, "All right, since you're so eager to learn, I'll teach you some of the footwork I just learned." After saying that, he made a pose and said, "You just follow my footwork behind me and practice step by step." Zhang Xiaohua ran behind He Tianshu happily and said, "All right, Captain He, you can start now." He Tianshu smiled and said, "All right, I'll start now. Follow me." Then, according to his own understanding, he performed the footwork he just performed at a very slow speed again. Zhang Xiaohua followed behind him. Perhaps because she had seen it twice just now, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have much difficulty performing it. When He Tianshu saw this, he sped up. When he reached the difficult point, He Tianshu first stepped in the same place, but it was just a pose. Then, he turned around and leaped to the side. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a playful smile. Zhang Xiaohua, who was eager to learn, didn't have any other thoughts. When she reached the difficult point with He Tianshu, she suddenly saw He Tianshu stop and stand to the side. She was shocked, but she didn't know why, but her 2 feet naturally followed He Tianshu's pose and stepped in the same place at the same time. This was the effect He Tianshu wanted. He quietly waited for Zhang Xiaohua to fall. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's body had already tilted to one side, just like He Tianshu. However, at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was staring blankly at He Tianshu, who was standing at the side and watching the show. He did not intentionally control his falling body. However, at this moment, his right foot that was about to step on his other foot naturally took a small step forward and missed him. Immediately, his right leg followed his body to the side and straightened his unbalanced body. Then, he changed his position and moved his body to another place. This very natural change made He Tianshu, who wanted to see Zhang Xiaohua make a fool of herself, drop his eyeballs to the ground. What was going on? He Tianshu walked forward excitedly and asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, have you seen this footwork before?" Zhang Xiaohua stood there in a daze. She didn't understand and said, "Captain He, of course I haven't seen it before. I don't understand it." He Tianshu took out a few thin pieces of paper and pointed to a spot on it. He said, "Since you haven't seen it before, how did you execute this footwork so accurately? This last step is actually exactly the same as what was written in the secret manual. I tried this position and angle a few times just now, but I didn't succeed. I was so tired that I even fell to the ground." At this point, He Tianshu didn't care about his face anymore and spilled everything out. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "How would I know? I only executed it according to the footwork you taught me." He Tianshu didn't believe her and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, can you execute it again?" Zhang Xiaohua recalled in her mind and said, "I'll try. I should be able to." After saying that, she followed her memory and combined it with He Tianshu's impression. She executed it step by step. Although Zhang Xiaohua hadn't executed the difficult part just now, He Tianshu had already executed it. He Tianshu was deeply aware of the complexity of the ethereal steps. It was only after a few days of seclusion that he was able to gain a rough understanding of the ethereal steps. Previously, he had only been able to execute it fluently because of the secret manual. It seemed like this was the first time Zhang Xiaohua had seen him execute the ethereal steps. He had only seen it a few times and he had already mastered it so perfectly. This seemed to be very different from his impression of the clumsy Zhang Xiaohua who learned fist techniques. However, the final result was another blow to He Tianshu's self-confidence. Zhang Xiaohua actually executed the difficult part perfectly. She turned around beautifully and stopped in her tracks. She smiled and asked, "Captain He, do you think it should be executed like this?" He Tianshu stuttered and said in disbelief, yes, it's like this." Immediately, he threw Zhang Xiaohua aside and practiced it again in disbelief. Unfortunately, he still stopped at the difficult part and almost fell. He Tianshu was puzzled. Why couldn't he do it well? Why did this Zhang Xiaohua succeed in one try? Hence, He Tianshu walked to Zhang Xiaohua's side and rubbed his hands. He asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, how did you do it just now? How did you manage to take that step so easily? I see that you slide quite beautifully. You really have my style. Can you tell me how you control your body when you're about to fall?" Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a while. She said, "Captain He, I don't know exactly how I did it. However, I didn't control my body. I just extended my leg naturally. That sliding step was also done casually. I felt that it was very suitable for my body." He Tianshu was puzzled. He said, "Your body is already crooked. How can you not control it? You just let yourself fall." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. "Yes, that's it." He Tianshu thought for a while and said, "I know. As long as you let nature take its course, your left foot will definitely let your right foot pass. Do the sliding step." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't explain it, so she said, "I think so. Anyway, I didn't do anything." He Tianshu nodded and began to practice again. However, Captain He was even more miserable this time. His body fell to the ground, hard and fast. He Tianshu jumped up from the ground and shouted in exasperation, "Didn't you say that you didn't do anything? Why can't you fall?" Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, "Maybe it's a problem of character. Captain He, when I came back from ethereal heights yesterday, I helped an old woman cross the road." How could He Tianshu believe this? He gestured and said, "First, I put my left foot here, then my right foot here. My body is crooked. Since you said to follow my body, I naturally used my strength to walk here. Then, my body was still crooked. The more I tried to use strength, the more crooked my body was. What's going on?" Seeing He Tianshu muttering like a devil, Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. She asked, "Captain He, why do you need to use your strength to step forward? What strength are you using?" He Tianshu was a little impatient. He said, "Of course it's internal strength. Without internal strength, how can your steps be fast and elegant?" Zhang Xiaohua pouted. "Captain He, when did I have internal strength? I haven't found my sense of qi yet." He Tianshu heard this and his expression changed. He slapped his forehead and seemed to understand. His cheap disciple didn't have any internal strength at all. How could she use her strength to her feet? After finding out the reason, He Tianshu couldn't wait to practice again. Sure enough, this time, he was successful. He Tianshu was not only happy, but also had a strange feeling. This footwork actually rejected internal strength. Sigh. He Tianshu sighed. He didn't know what he was thinking about. Then, he raised his feet and prepared to walk away. Zhang Xiaohua quickly caught up and asked, "Captain He, are we not practicing anymore? It's still early. Breakfast isn't ready yet." He Tianshu said curiously, "I've been studying it for a long time, but this is all I know. How can I continue practicing? Why don't I give you this secret manual and you can practice it first? After saying this, he acted as if he was going to take something out. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she quickly waved her hand. What a joke! She had just looked at it and saw that it was full of small feet. Looking at it gave her a headache. She knew very well how difficult it was to be self-taught. Since someone was willing to teach her, why should she take the unorthodox path? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I'm just worried about Captain He's body. It's still early for breakfast, so why don't you practice? As the saying goes, work is for the villa, but the body is for the individual. You must take care of your body. Please add it to your collection, thank you. Chapter 161. He Tianshu was only joking. If he were to give the secret manual to Zhang Xiaohua, what would he learn? With Zhang Xiaohua's half-baked level, how would he be able to understand the profound, ethereal steps? If he were to give it to Zhang Xiaohua, he would not feel at ease. He Tianshu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was tactful and said, It's not that I don't want to practice, but I have already finished comprehending the contents of the past few days. If I were to continue, there would only be leftovers. I might as well take a look at the back. Moreover, speaking up to this point, he rolled his eyes and grumbled, If I were to practice the footwork in front of you, I'm afraid it would hurt my confidence. Zhang Xiaohua did not understand and tugged at He Tianshu's sleeves, angrily saying, Captain He, how can you say that? I am wholeheartedly trying to learn from you. If you don't explain clearly, I will go to the manor lord and sue you for slander. He Tianshu smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I really cannot see through you. If you are smart, then you can't even learn the basic Arhat fist. You can't even sense the qi in a simple internal cultivation method like the frenzied bull's strength. It can be said that you are not cut out for martial arts. But if I were to say that you are stupid, look at your horse stance and the ethereal steps you learned. I don't even know what to say and can only describe you as a genius. Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Captain He thinks too highly of me. The footwork just now did not use any internal energy. Isn't it just a coincidence that I don't have any internal energy? He Tianshu pretended to disagree and said, That's not true, that's not true. The footwork that I was practicing just now was actually something that I had comprehended for many days. The profoundness of the ethereal steps is very great and every step is very particular. It's not something that can be casually memorized and used. I had to carefully ponder over many details before I was able to learn it. How could I be like you? Just by watching me use it a few times and being able to imitate it and learn it with a bit of practice. Just this perception alone is enough to make me envious. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. He had only just seen a shadow of the martial arts palace and had no idea about the structure inside. What right did he have to speak? He Tianshu scratched the short beard under his chin and said thoughtfully, Actually, what that Li Jinfeng young master said makes sense. With your smart brain, you should still study literature. Right now, your hand is not very good, and I don't know when it will recover. The chances of you making a name for yourself in martial arts are not high. Right now, your fist techniques are already able to protect yourself. Switching to writing is also a very good path for you. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head like a rattledrum and said, Being literate and well-read, of course I'm willing, I also like it. However, I prefer the carefree feeling of brandishing a stick. As the ancients say, 10 steps kill one person, 1,000 li do not leave a trace. Just thinking about it makes me feel relaxed and happy. This is the realm I'm pursuing. He Tianshu shook his head and said, How can it be as easy as you think? In this world, things are often easy to think about, but difficult to do. The days in the Jianghu are filled with foul winds and bloody rain. You've only just seen a corner of the harmonious world. It's not too much to say that you're looking at a leopard through a tube. Practice is the only way to test the truth. Only when you walk on your own will you know the hardships. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she immediately thought of her second brother's situation. She couldn't help but feel touched and didn't say anything else. The two of them walked out of the forest one after the other. When they reached the small courtyard, He Tianshu said to Zhang Xiaohua, "That's right, Zhang Xiaohua, Nya Xiaoer and the rest have been cooped up in the medicine hall these few days to prepare for the martial arts exhibition. As for me, I also want to comprehend the ethereal steps and work in the medicine fields." He Tianshu's words were a little forced. Oh Yan had already clearly instructed that if Zhang Xiaohua was willing to work in the fields, then she could do so. If she didn't want to, then it was up to her. During this period of time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't slack off and spent a lot of time in the medicine fields. But that was because He Tianshu and the rest of the people from the medicine hall were all there. Now that they had something to do, they pushed all the work to Zhang Xiaohua. This made He Tianshu feel a little ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua didn't think too much about it and said, "It's all right, Captain He. You guys go ahead. I'll take care of all the work in the fields." Just as she finished speaking, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of the situation of cultivating in the medicine fields at night and immediately added, "How about this, Captain He? I'll just set up a shed in the medicine fields and stay there at night." These were Zhang Xiaohua's heartfelt words, but in He Tianshu's ears, it naturally had a different meaning. He widened his eyes and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you don't have to exaggerate like that. I'll also go to the medicine fields when I have time. Don't think too much about it. This martial arts exhibition is an important test that every disciple of the Misty School has to face every year. It's very important for their future development. Nya Xiaoer and the others aren't really slacking off, they just can't let go of that side." The current Zhang Xiaohua was already mentally mature. How could she not understand He Tianshu's meaning? She hurriedly said, "Captain He, I'm speaking from the bottom of my heart. When the crops at our Guizhuang house are ripe, we set up straw huts next to the fields to take care of the crops. This is a custom. I don't have any intention of slacking off at all." He Tianshu had never done farm work before, so he naturally didn't know. However, he also believed that with Zhang Xiaohua's character, she wouldn't do something that would undermine him. He could only wave his hand and say, "Do as you see fit. Anyways, I think that what you're doing is a bit exaggerated." The two of them went their separate ways and returned to their respective houses. That morning, it was a very cloudy day and the sun couldn't be seen. However, this didn't affect Zhang Xiaohua's good mood at all. To be honest, there wasn't much work to be done in the medicinal field. It was just weeding, watering, and getting rid of insects. She didn't know what was going on in the medicinal field. There weren't too many insects, but the weeds were growing like crazy. It was different from the farmland at the Guizhuang house. If it wasn't cleaned up for a day, a lot of weeds would grow. However, these tasks were enough for Zhang Xiaohua to do alone. Sometimes, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but wonder if the pharmaceutical hall put so many people in the medicinal field because there were too many people in the Misty School. The cost was also high, so they put a few people to be raised in the Huanxi manor. Zhang Xiaohua easily finished the work and started to practice his worry-free heart sutra. This medicinal field was a good place. Not only could he easily sense qi and draw it into his body, but this place was also a restricted area in the Huanxi manor. Ordinary guards and servants were not allowed to come close. Otherwise, Zhang Xiaohua, who had been meditating in the medicinal field for the whole night, would have been discovered by the patrolling guards. Zhang Xiaohua was also very relaxed in drawing qi into his body. However, when the qi disappeared into his body, Zhang Xiaohua's heart suddenly moved. It seemed like he was touched by something. However, when he thought about it again, there was no trace of it. He couldn't help but be puzzled. What was going on these 2 days? He was always startled and felt like he had thought of something, but he didn't know what it was. It was really puzzling. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he suddenly thought of another matter. He had to talk to Manor Head O about the matter of building a shed. If he didn't agree, how could he make the decision on his own? Wouldn't that become an illegal building? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua stopped cultivating. He stood up and quickly walked into the inner courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua was currently the manor head's favorite. This fact was known by everyone in the inner courtyard. This was because Zhang Xiaohua didn't need to report when he entered the inner courtyard. As long as the manor head was in the hall, he could be brought in by someone. However, very few of them knew the inside story. However, this didn't affect their good impression of Zhang Xiaohua. Qiuju brought Zhang Xiaohua into the inner courtyard. As she walked, she was blushing and secretly peeking at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was also puzzled as he walked. Didn't he secretly wipe his face? He thought to himself, could it be that I didn't wash my face properly just now? This guy had forgotten that it was his first time in the inner courtyard and he had casually done a good deed in the autumn chrysanthemum courtyard. When he entered the hall, O Yen and Elder Yu were sitting inside and discussing something. When O Yen saw Zhang Xiaohua enter, she was very enthusiastic and asked, Xiaohua, why are you looking for me today? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I'm free today, so I came to see big sister O. O Yen said, who would believe you? Do you think I don't know what's going on in the medicinal field? Right now, Nye Xiao'er and the others are practicing martial arts in the medicinal field. They don't have any extra energy to spare here. With your personality, you won't let go and must be busy in the medicinal field. Where would you find the time to spare? Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. She didn't seem to realize that her lie had been exposed. She cupped her hands and said, Big Sister O's eyes are indeed as bright as torches. You can even see through my little thoughts. Elder Yu also smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, when you first came, you were so simple. It's only been a few days and you've already learned how to be glib. Zhang Xiaohua blushed slightly and said, Elder Yu, look at what you're saying. I'm showing my maturity. O Yen said, forget it, don't hang out with Ma Jing and the others in the future. They're all unreliable. Oh right, what's the matter? Zhang Xiaohua said seriously, it's like this, big sister O. Didn't you just say that there's not enough manpower in the medicinal field? I thought that since I have nothing to do, why don't I set up a shed next to the medicinal field at night and take it as watching over the crops? What do you think? Elder Yu and O Yen looked at each other and felt that it was strange. O Yen asked, Zhang Xiaohua, I know that you're wholeheartedly devoted to the manor. No matter how busy you are in the medicinal field, you don't have to work through the night. You're exaggerating. Elder Yu also shook his head. Zhang Xiaohua explained in a low voice, Big Sister O, it's like this. In our village, during the summer or autumn harvest, we also set up a straw shed in the field. On one hand, it's to watch over the crops. On the other hand, it's also to work nearby. I'm also a little homesick, so I thought of this idea. O Yan's expression softened and said, Zhang Xiaohua, how long have you been out? Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation, 1 year and 4 months. O Yan said, how can a young child like you not be homesick after such a long time? How about this, I'll give you some time off to go home and take a look, okay? Really? Zhang Xiaohua stood up in surprise and asked, then, will you deduct my monthly salary? O Yan didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, no, just take it as a paid annual leave. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, that's great, it'll be best if Big Sister O sends me to Lu Town on official business. O Yan asked curiously, why is that? Zhang Xiaohua smiled slyly and said, isn't there still a subsidy? Elder Yu rubbed his forehead with his only arm, his face full of helplessness. He had entrusted his sword skills to the wrong person. O Yen said, okay, I'll let you go to Lu Town on official business. You don't have to build that straw shed anymore. Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment, then said, I still can't, Big Sister O. Captain He and the others are busy now, and there's no one in the medicinal field, so I don't feel at ease leaving. Moreover, it's not good for me to go home alone. I have to go with my second brother, but he just entered the Misty School and it's very inappropriate for him to take leave now. Lastly, I still have something to ask Big Sister O. I'm afraid that I won't have time to go back during this period. O Yen was stunned and said, what else do you have to say? Why don't you say it together? Zhang Xiaohua said, I'll wait for Big Sister O to agree to the first thing first, then I'll talk about the rest. Oh Yen giggled as if she was looking at her naughty little brother and said, okay, building a shed isn't a big deal, so I'll agree. However, the weather is still cold now, so don't catch a cold at night. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, thank you, Big Sister O. Oh Yen smiled and said, why aren't you talking about the other thing? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, Big Sister O, the Misty School is holding a martial arts exhibition right now. I heard from Captain He that when he was young, he seemed to have seen people from Huanxi Mountain Villa participate in it. I want to ask if our Huanxi Mountain Villa can also participate in this martial arts exhibition. Oh Yen was stunned when she heard this and said, yes, not only can our Huanxi Mountain Villa participate, even the Lotus Escort Agency can participate. When I was young, I also participated with the representatives of Huanxi Mountain Villa. But when Zhang Xiaohua heard that she could participate, she was overjoyed and said, it's great that we can participate. Big Sister O, I want to participate in this martial arts exhibition. Is it possible? When she said this, not only was O Yen puzzled, even Elder Yu was also puzzled. Elder Yu asked, Zhang Xiaohua, this martial arts exhibition is a competition of martial arts. Are your martial arts very good? Even if you have killed the black-clothed man with a high level of martial arts, you can't use that kind of sword technique against the ethereal sex brothers. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Elder Yu, look at what you're saying. How can I not know about this matter? I definitely won't use sword moves in the martial arts exhibition. Elder Yu said, if you don't use sword moves, what will you use? Do you know anything else? Zhang Xiaohua said innocently, Elder Yu, haven't you seen me fight before? I also know a set of fist moves. Elder Yu found it funny, but he didn't have the heart to discourage her and only said, hee, I've seen your incomplete set of fist moves pieced together. It looks ordinary. Oh Yan, who was at the side, kindly reminded her, Zhang Xiaohua, it's not that I don't want you to participate in the martial arts exhibition, but it has been a long time since someone from our villa participated. Moreover, our participation in the martial arts exhibition is different from the disciples from the Misty School. They participate in the martial arts exhibition in order to advance and obtain new martial arts and high-level fist moves to learn. Our villa's representative is purely here to exchange martial arts. If you win, it will be glorious, but there won't be any benefits. If you lose, then your face will be swept to the ground. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she naturally understood and said, I know, Big Sister O. I only want to exchange pointers with others for fun, not for any benefits. You also know my aptitude. I can't sense any chi at all when cultivating internal energy. Even if I know a set of fist moves, I don't have the extravagant hope of winning. When O Yen heard this, she still said, but Zhang Xiaohua, you have to know that if you participate in the martial arts exhibition, because you aren't a disciple from the Misty School, you can only compete with the first disciple. Before O Yen finished speaking, Zhang Xiaohua interrupted, I know, Big Sister O. I'm not a beginner, so it's fine if I lose to anyone. When O Yen heard this, she said, all right then. Since you know and are willing to participate, I'll find someone to ask about the rules. After all, our Huanxi Villa hasn't sent a representative to participate in the martial arts exhibition for a long time, so I don't know the rules. However, Zhang Xiaohua, your spirit of facing difficulties is commendable, so I can't not help you. At this moment, Elder Yu asked softly, Zhang Xiaohua, you said that you can't sense qi when cultivating internal energy? What kind of internal energy cultivation method are you cultivating? Who taught you? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she took out the reckless bull force and handed it to Elder Yu. She then told him about how Zhang Xiaohua had helped her obtain this internal energy cultivation method. Elder Yu took the reckless bull's force manual and read it carefully before handing it back to Zhang Xiaohua. He gestured for Zhang Xiaohua to keep it properly and said with a chuckle, I knew it. I heard that you were lucky and obtained this supreme Nigong Heart Sutra. I thought that you really managed to cultivate Nigong Heart Sutra from it. So it turns out that you're cultivating this book. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't say anything. On the other hand, Oh Yen was also a smart person. She immediately thought of something and asked, Zhang Xiaohua, tell me the truth. Did you really set up the shed next to the medicinal field so that you could work for a long time? Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. Was she really supposed to say that she was there so that she could absorb qi into her body? At this moment, Elder Yu spoke in a very friendly manner, Zhang Xiaohua, did you not sense qi when cultivating this reckless bull force? Zhang Xiaohua nodded in agreement. Elder Yu asked again, then did you ask He Tianshu for help? He advised you to try it more often, or to try it out in an open area at night? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was secretly delighted. It seemed that Elder Yu had misunderstood him. However, he couldn't find a reason to push the blame to He Tianshu. After all, He Tianshu was his chief master. It was better for him to die than for him to die. This was far from death. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua still nodded her head. Elder Yu sighed and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I've been paying attention to you ever since you started practicing martial arts. I know that you're a resilient child who can endure hardships and isn't afraid of hardships. That's why I've been treating you differently. However, the path of martial arts is all about comprehension. Many times, hard work won't be able to make up for your lack of talent. I really admire you for having the thought to set up a shed in the medicinal field so that you can focus on sensing qi in the middle of the night. When I was young, I didn't even put in as much effort as you. However, Zhang Xiaohua, if it's meant to be, then it will be. If it's not meant to be, then don't force it. There are many things that you have to be open-minded about. Elder Yu's consecutive but made Zhang Xiaohua's expression change. Chapter 162. Seeing the change in Zhang Xiaohua's expression, Elder Yu also felt that his words were a bit harsh, as if he had struck a blow to this diligent country boy's heart. He rephrased his words slightly and continued, I've also seen you practice the fist technique. Your comprehension is extremely poor, so you can't learn the entire set of fist techniques. However, this is also fine. It doesn't affect you much if you don't know how. However, this internal cultivation method is different. It's purely a matter of life and death. If you're not careful and go crazy, you'll be seriously injured and your life will be in danger. This reckless bull force is a good thing. It's easy to understand and is very suitable for you. However, I still have to remind you that if you try many times and still can't sense qi, then don't go down a dead end. It's better to give up and take a step back. You can also try external martial arts. It's also very good. After listening for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood that Elder Yu was still concerned about him and didn't treat him as an outsider. Zhang Xiaohua was very grateful and said to Elder Yu, I understand your good intentions, but there's a hidden meaning behind the straw shed. These few days, Captain He has also told me a lot of things to take note of. I will be careful. Right now, I'm just looking for a sense of qi. I haven't circulated my qi yet, so there won't be any big problems. Elder Yu, don't worry. Don't worry. Then he turned to O Yen and said, Sister O, the main purpose of building the straw shed is to look at the medicinal field. Practicing martial arts is also secondary. O Yen saw that he was so considerate and didn't blame him. She said, It's okay, Zhang Xiaohua. Even if you want to practice martial arts, Sister is willing to support you. However, it's better to be careful. Don't practice at night without caring about your life just to win the martial arts competition. Zhang Xiaohua bowed and said, I understand, Sister O. O Yen asked again, then how do you build the straw shed? Do you need help from the people in the village? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, No need. I've been building straw sheds since I was young. I don't need anyone's help. I can finish it in an afternoon. O Yen smiled and said, Then you can go and get whatever materials you need from the warehouse. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed when she got the confirmation. She took her leave and rushed to the warehouse to get her things. When Zhang Xiaohua was young, she often built thatched huts in the fields with her father and elder brother. Naturally, she was familiar with them. Moreover, it was just to block the dew. It was not exquisite, so it was even easier. Zhang Xiaohua finished it in an afternoon. Moreover, because he hadn't done any heavy work for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to feel that his strength had increased a lot when he picked up the wood in the afternoon. He could pick up a lot of thick and heavy wood with one hand. Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled. Could it be that this strength would continue to increase as she aged? He didn't know how much strength he had now. In addition, when Zhang Xiaohua was laying the straw and tying the rope, she could clearly feel that the fingers on her right hand were more flexible. It seemed that the injury on her bones had already healed. Happy things happened one after another. It was really Zhang Xiaohua's happy life. The straw shed was built next to the medicinal field. It was lonely and looked very out of place. However, other than Zhang Xiaohua, no one else came to see it. Who would have any objections? For the whole day, Zhang Xiaohua didn't see He Tianshu. She guessed that he was pulling his hair in his room to comprehend. Hopefully, he wouldn't be bald early when he came out. Dusk arrived as promised. Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged in the straw shed. He faced the setting sun in the west. It dyed the clouds in the distance red and was incomparably gorgeous. He looked at it silently and felt very emotional. The setting sun was infinitely beautiful. It was just that dusk was approaching. The beautiful scenery in front of him only attracted Zhang Xiaohua's attention for a moment. Immediately, he closed his eyes and started to circulate the qi according to the Carefree Heart Sutra. The qi of vitality was still the same. There wasn't a lot. It flowed down bit by bit. Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry and only guided it slowly. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua's body seemed to have become a magnet, automatically absorbing the qi of vitality. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua had more time to appreciate the qi of vitality that was introduced into his body. The qi of vitality in one's pores was so subtle that Zhang Xiaohua still didn't get anything. The Carefree Heart Sutra also didn't talk about how to sense the qi of vitality that entered the body. It only talked about how to move the qi of vitality that entered the body. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't know how to do it. After pondering for a long time without any results, Zhang Xiaohua was a little impatient. His thoughts were a little broken. He thought about the difference between the Spirit of the Bull and the Carefree Heart Sutra. Just as he was thinking, an idea suddenly appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. It lit up him like lightning. He remembered that He Tianshu had said that the feeling of qi of internal strength was not really a warm current flowing in from the forehead at the beginning. The warm current in the meridians was generated by the thoughts of the practitioner. Then, although he couldn't sense the qi of vitality in his pores, could he still think about it? At this time, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood. He always felt that something important in his mind these days, but he couldn't find a clue. It turned out that it was here. Speaking of this, he couldn't help but clap his hands and praise Zhang Xiaohua. Most of the things in the world were impermanent. Just like the paths on the land, they were originally insignificant. However, after many people walked on them, they naturally became roads. The Heart Sutra didn't talk about how to sense the traceless qi of vitality, but Zhang Xiaohua borrowed the idea of using the idea to promote the cultivation of qi of vitality. He really could be called a genius. However, if this kind of genius fell into the eyes of an internal strength master, he would definitely scoff and shake his head secretly. There was only one comment: the ignorant are fearless. With a plan in mind, Zhang Xiaohua began to experiment. He imagined that his pores were filled with qi of vitality. According to the Heart Sutra, he absorbed them into the meridians in his body. Then, according to the Heart Sutra, he still followed the Heart Sutra in his mind and circulated the invisible qi of vitality along the meridians in his body. After one cycle of circulation, it returned to the middle dantian. Zhang Xiaohua didn't continue to circulate his internal strength. Instead, he first sensed his own body and didn't find anything strange. This meant that although he didn't know if the Heart Sutra was effective, at least there was no harm. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua continued to circulate his internal strength. After 36 cycles, he stopped. When he opened his eyes, it was already night. Thinking that he hadn't practiced his fist technique and sword moves yet, Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the straw hut. The sky outside was dark again, and there were no moon or stars. Taking advantage of the night, Zhang Xiaohua practiced his sword moves and Big Dipper fist. When the cold current flowed through his body, Zhang Xiaohua felt incomparably comfortable. After ending the fist technique, Zhang Xiaohua discovered a new problem. In the past, he always thought that the flow of the fist technique was in his meridians, but today, he just thought about the flow of qi of vitality. This was the meridians recorded in the Heart Sutra, so it should be the real meridians. These meridians were different from the meridians involved in the fist technique. Why was that? Moreover, the sword moves that Elder Yu taught him could also cause a warm current to flow through his left hand. This warm current didn't flow through his entire body, only his left arm. Perhaps it was a part of his meridians, but it wasn't recorded in the Heart Sutra, so why was that? In order to find out the reason, Zhang Xiaohua practiced the Big Dipper fist a few more times, carefully feeling the flow of the energy. When Zhang Xiaohua stopped and looked back, he suddenly realized that the flow of the Big Dipper fist didn't seem to flow through the meridians in his body. Or more accurately, the flow actually flowed through all the bones in Zhang Xiaohua's body. The 108 fist techniques, each move would cause the flow of energy to flow through a bone. When the fist technique was finished, it would flow through all 108 bones in his body. Zhang Xiaohua's brain couldn't process it. The fist technique that he pieced together had such an effect. What was this fist technique doing? Could it be that it was tempering his bones? This was a question that had no answer. No one could answer him. Zhang Xiaohua touched his smooth chin and stopped thinking. He knew that there was no one he could ask, so why did he have to make things difficult for himself? Someone once said, why should a woman make things difficult for another woman? Then, why should he make things difficult for himself? Since he didn't want to make things difficult for himself, the warm current caused by the sword move came even more abruptly. It wasn't within the scope of Zhang Xiaohua's consideration. Zhang Xiaohua returned to the straw hut with an indescribable feeling in his heart. Uneasy. How could that be? This was the Big Dipper fist technique that he personally named. He didn't feel any discomfort after practicing it for so long, so what was there to be afraid of? Wild with joy. That was a bit true. He Tianshu and Elder Yu both wanted to persuade him to give up on cultivating inner force skills and change to outer force skills. This bone tempering technique was probably one of the outer force skills, so there was nothing to be proud of or happy about. Secretly happy? That was for sure. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but think of the heroes that were mentioned in some wuxia novels. Those who were able to achieve great things and stand out from the crowd all had their own unique ways. One of them was to cultivate both inner and outer force. Didn't he Tianshu also say that one should cultivate inner force and outer force muscles, bones, and skin? If he used the Big Dipper fist technique to cultivate his muscles, bones, and skin, and used the Carefree Heart Sutra to cultivate inner force, wasn't he walking towards the path of a hero? The more Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, the more beautiful it became. His little tail slowly began to curl up. However, when he sat on the ground in the straw hut, the coldness of the ground beat his tail back, and also pulled Zhang Xiaohua out of his dream of being a hero. Putting aside whether his understanding was correct, just the feeling of qi that he had just obtained, there was still no trace of inner force. What was the use of thinking so much? 10,000 years was too long. He could only seize every moment. It was better for him to do his part well first before anything else. Zhang Xiaohua lit the oil lamp in the straw hut, picked up a book, and read it with relish. As the saying goes, skills don't weigh down one's body. If he could learn a little more, he would have a little more capital to make a living. If he didn't have great achievements in martial arts, all kinds of medicinal herbs could let him live a comfortable life without worrying about not being able to eat red braised pork. This was Zhang Xiaohua's lofty dream. After reading for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua reluctantly closed the book. Knowledge was the best spiritual food for human beings. Zhang Xiaohua's heart was sad. But his body's intuition clearly told him that the time was not early. It was almost midnight. You should close the book and prepare to rest. Zhang Xiaohua had to pack up his things and blow out the oil lamp. It must be said that this person was strange. Zhang Xiaohua had always been in the Guizhuang house and slept very early. He didn't know that he had to sleep at midnight, so he didn't think much of it. After coming out, after a few times, he knew. His body naturally had a kind of adaptability. When it was almost time, he would have a kind of intuition. Although he didn't watch the night people knock on the clappers and announce the time, he still knew. After packing up everything, Zhang Xiaohua walked to the middle of the straw hut and sat cross-legged. He faced the sky and took in the 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing. Not long after, he entered the realm of emptiness and began his routine of drawing qi into his body. When Zhang Xiaohua woke up in the morning, he didn't immediately get up. Instead, he calmed his heart and moved the yuan qi in his pores. After circulating the yuan qi in his body's meridians for 36 cycles, he stood up and went outside the straw hut to practice his fist and sword techniques. During the day, there was only Zhang Xiaohua in the herb field. He Tianshu still didn't appear. However, Zhang Xiaohua found that the annoying weeds in the herb field seemed to be less than usual. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel very gratified. Heaven rewards the diligent. This heaven also saw that he was taking care of the herb field by himself and specially let the weeds go away to give him more time to practice martial arts. Involuntarily, Zhang Xiaohua had a trace of anticipation for the upcoming martial arts exhibition. Qigong and footwork should be practiced in the forest. Zhang Xiaohua could only leave the herb field. On the way to the forest, Zhang Xiaohua met Ma Jing and Lu Er. When Ma Jing saw Zhang Xiaohua, he greeted him from afar and ran straight over. He wanted to grab Zhang Xiaohua's hand. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was very agile. He immediately moved aside a little and cupped his hands. "Brother Ma, long time no see. How is everything?" Ma Jing's hand was suspended in the air. There was no embarrassment on his face. He immediately cupped his hands and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, how are you?" Then, he winked at him with a look of understanding. He said in a low voice, "Zhang Xiaohua, you're really something. When I saw you go to Captain He's place, I thought you were just lucky. Now I know that you have real talent. Brother really admires you." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was happy and said, "That's right. Isn't this all thanks to Brother Ma's influence? If it wasn't for your help, how could I have grown so quickly?" Ma Jing smiled until his eyes were squinted. He enjoyed it very much. He glanced at Lu Er from the corner of his eyes and said, "This is also inseparable from your talent. Look, this old brother of mine, Lu Er, has been with me for so long. Why is he still not enlightened? Oh right, Zhang Xiaohua, if you have any riches in the future, you must think of us brothers. After all, I lived with you before." When Zhang Xiaohua thought about the past, he couldn't help but have goosebumps. He quickly said, Of course, of course." Ma Jing got a promise and smiled charmingly. "I'll remember this. When you have power, I'll have the capital to show off. Maybe I can also write a book called The Story of Zhang Xiaohua and Me." Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback and quickly advised, "Brother Ma, we've only lived in the same house for such a short period of time. How much can you remember about me? Besides, is there so much content for you to write a book?" Ma Jing waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about that. If I can make money, what can't I write?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Ma Jing cupped his hands and said goodbye to him. "Okay, let's not talk about anything else. You should focus on improving. Everything can wait until you have achievements." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and nodded. "That's right. Brother Ma is right. Everything depends on real talent to achieve success. I'll definitely work hard." Ma Jing smiled and waved his hand to leave. Lu Er, who was beside him, smiled at Zhang Xiaohua and chased after him. But after just 2 steps, Ma Jing turned back and called, "Zhang Xiaohua." Zhang Xiaohua could only stop and turn back to ask, "Brother Ma, is there anything else?" Ma Jing looked at Zhang Xiaohua with great respect and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, your action of building a straw shed in the medicine field was really wonderful. This flattery is really good. It's exactly what our village head wants. Today, the servants who are united around Brother Shi are all talking about you. This big brother is full of admiration. How did you come up with such a wonderful idea? This kind of real talent, this big brother can't even catch up with a horse." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned on the spot. Ma Jing didn't care about Zhang Xiaohua's reaction and turned to leave. As he walked, he muttered, "I have to hurry to the warehouse. Don't let Brother Shi and the others take the lead." Zhang Xiaohua looked at Ma Jing's back as he left. He didn't know what to say. Even if he didn't mean it, the listener would understand. Although he didn't say anything, what he did made people misunderstand a lot. Thinking about how this wasn't the ancient people's heart, then thinking about his second brother's experience in the Misty School, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was in turmoil. However, he suddenly burst out laughing. After today, wouldn't there be a lot of straw sheds next to the medicine field that Ma Jing and the others were in charge of? That scene would be spectacular. But what did this have to do with him? The ancients didn't say that, okay? Walk your own path and let others say what they want. A gentleman should be magnanimous. In any case, he had a clear conscience. How others saw him was their business. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand Zhang Xiaohua's intentions. There was a distance from the medicine field to the forest, so it was inevitable that he would pass by the small courtyard. In a hurry, many servants came to meet him. They all gave him a thumbs up. Zhang Xiaohua found it funny and didn't say anything. Looking at the direction that those people were heading, they were the same as Ma Jing. It seemed that today's warehouse would be lively. The forest was still so quiet. The moment Zhang Xiaohua stepped in, he immediately felt a sense of peace. He gently pursed his lips and smiled. This was the atmosphere that he liked. In his mind, he recalled the Qigong skills and ethereal steps that He Tianshu had taught him. Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and exerted force on his right foot. His body shot forward like an arrow, like a butterfly flying freely in the forest. Please add it to your collection, thank you. Chapter 163. The forest was still the same and there was no one else around. However, Zhang Xiaohua was no longer the Zhang Xiaohua of the past. Once he entered the forest, he felt confident. He steadied himself and took a deep breath. Following He Tianshu's instructions, he practiced Qigong in the gaps of the forest to his heart's content. There were many types of Qigong in the pugilistic world. The simplest was a light body technique that allowed one's body to be nimble and move at superhuman speeds. The more profound ones were specialized breathing methods and internal energy circulation methods. The ethereal steps imparted a person's potential beyond these. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was already very familiar with the ethereal steps technique and was very proficient in it. Unfortunately, he had never learned Qigong before. Not to mention that there was a profound cultivation method that could match it, he had not even glimpsed the simple Qigong technique. What he was practicing now was the simple Qigong technique that He Tianshu had taught him last time. He Tianshu's Qigong technique was a secret of the ethereal sect and naturally could not be taught to him. He Tianshu did not know if Zhang Xiaohua knew other Qigong techniques. In short, he did not teach Zhang Xiaohua any of them. However, with just a little understanding of Qigong, Zhang Xiaohua was able to freely shuttle through the forest like a butterfly fluttering among the flowers. His body was incomparably ethereal, giving off an ethereal feeling. It was just that his slightly rough clothes dragged him down to the mundane world. After practicing for a while, Zhang Xiaohua was a little dispirited. What he was practicing was only moving through the gaps of the forest. Although it was swift, it could not leave the ground and could not move about at high altitudes. It was fundamentally different from Qigong, so how could it pique his interest? Following that, Zhang Xiaohua familiarized himself with the second level of the Misty School's footwork and stopped. Although the footwork was profound, it was only recently comprehended by He Tianshu. Zhang Xiaohua had just warmed up and had already finished practicing it. There was no further explanation, which made Zhang Xiaohua unable to stop himself. He pondered for a moment before walking out of the forest and towards the small courtyard. As he walked, he wondered how much Captain he had comprehended. He Tianshu's room was half closed. When Zhang Xiaohua poked his head out to take a look, He Tianshu was still in the same position with a piece of paper in his hand, sleeping on the table. The entire room was filled with the smell of oil. Captain, he must have forgotten to eat and sleep again last night. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes darted around. He tiptoed in front of the table and carefully pulled out the few pieces of paper from He Tianshu's hands. But just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to move, he heard He Tianshu's angry roar, "Who is it?" Then, without opening his eyes, He Tianshu turned around and threw a punch at Zhang Xiaohua's face with his left hand. Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to wake He Tianshu up, so he was very careful. That roar scared him, and before he could make a sound, he saw a fist coming from afar. It was getting bigger and bigger, and a strong gust of wind blew towards him. Without thinking, Zhang Xiaohua quickly let go of the pages and stepped back, but the fist was still chasing after him. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice. He moved his feet and dodged He Tianshu's fist. At that moment, Zhang Xiaohua had the chance to shout, "Captain He, it's me." He Tianshu's fist missed. He was about to bend his arm and strike with his elbow when he heard the familiar voice. He quickly stopped and opened his hazy eyes. He said in surprise, "Zhang Xiaohua. Why are you here?" Zhang Xiaohua stood far away and said embarrassedly, "Of course it's me, Captain He." He Tianshu rubbed his eyes and yawned. He said, "When did you come in? Why didn't I hear any footsteps?" Zhang Xiaohua walked up and said with a smile, "You were sleeping soundly, how could you hear me?" He Tianshu frowned and said, "How is that possible? Do you think that all inner force experts are like you, sleeping more deeply than anyone else and not waking up no matter how you call them? When I'm sleeping, I can feel it if someone comes within 3 feet of me." He Tianshu's mouth twitched a few times, and he said embarrassedly, "But, I watched for the entire night and didn't stop in the morning. Maybe I'm too tired." Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and asked in surprise, "Oh right, Zhang Xiaohua, you were able to dodge my fist just now. Did you use ethereal steps?" Zhang Xiaohua also seemed to have come to a realization as she said happily, "That's right, Captain He. I think so. When you hit me just now, I was also shocked. I didn't know how I dodged it. Now that I think about it, it must be that ethereal steps." He Tianshu's eyes curved as he said excitedly, "This ethereal steps is indeed worthy of its reputation. With your standard, you are actually able to dodge my fist. No one would dare to believe it. Ha ha ha, I must comprehend this ethereal steps to the end." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was also happy. She asked excitedly, "Captain He, how much have you comprehended? Hurry up and teach me." Hearing this, He Tianshu's smile froze on his face as he said angrily, "Zhang Xiaohua, do you think this is Arhat fist? This is one of the 3 divine skills of the Misty School. I've already comprehended enough in the past few days. If you want me to completely master it in a few days and teach it to you, that's not very possible. You only know how to eat ready-made food. Why don't you take a look for yourself? How difficult is this footwork? I've been reading it since yesterday and haven't comprehended much." After saying that, he was about to pass the pages in his hand to Zhang Xiaohua. However, halfway through, he retracted it and muttered to himself, "I've only just finished reading half of it. I'm not giving it to you." Then, he pointed to a page on the bed and said, "That one over there, take a look for yourself." How could Zhang Xiaohua want to read it himself? Having someone teach him was a very blissful thing. He didn't want to do it himself. However, seeing that He Tianshu was a little angry, He could only walk over and take the page in his hand. He pretended to read it and said, "All right, Captain He, I'll read it too. Let's read it together." He Tianshu snorted and muttered, "That's more like it. Look at my hard work too." Zhang Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, "All right, I'll learn from Captain He. I'll pay my respects to Captain He." The page was filled with dense footprints and some inexplicable numbers were written on it. There were also some tiny words beside it. Zhang Xiaohua was confused. How could he understand it? What should he do? He Tianshu looked at his embarrassed face and was overjoyed. He said, "First, look at the words beside it. Then, according to the explanation, look at the footprints. Those footprints are where you need to go and those numbers are the order of your steps." Only then did Zhang Xiaohua understand. He slowly read through it. In the beginning, he couldn't quite understand it, but once he combined it with the footprints, he slowly understood that this page was the second level of the ethereal steps cultivation technique. It was what He Tianshu had just comprehended. As Zhang Xiaohua read, a small figure appeared in his mind. It was practicing the ethereal steps according to the records on the page and Zhang Xiaohua's understanding. By the time Zhang Xiaohua finished reading the page, the figure had also finished demonstrating. It was basically the same as what He Tianshu had taught. There were only a few differences. These differences weren't the footwork but the figure. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know if it was a mistake in his understanding or something else. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua raised his head and asked, "Team leader He." He Tianshu narrowed his eyes and frowned. It was a crucial moment in his comprehension. When he heard Zhang Xiaohua calling out to him, his brows couldn't help but knit even tighter. He said impatiently, "What's the matter?" Zhang Xiaohua originally wanted to ask, "Why is it that what you taught is different from what I saw?" But when he saw He Tianshu's expression, it was obvious that he was impatient. He immediately swallowed his words and stammered, This seems to have just been learned." He Tianshu said, "Just take a look at it. Reviewing the old and learning the new is the true way to learn." Saying that, he took the page from Zhang Xiaohua's hands and looked at it carefully. He thought to himself, "I really took the wrong one. This kid can actually understand it." He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with some surprise and took 2 pages from the other end of the table. After looking at it carefully, he handed it to Zhang Xiaohua and said, "This is the 3rd level of the cultivation technique. Take a look. Oh right, go back to your room and read it. I want to be alone." Zhang Xiaohua took it and was about to turn around and leave. He Tianshu said with a bit of a smile, "If you have any insights, don't forget to tell me." Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and didn't say anything. She closed the door and returned to her room. Behind her, He Tianshu curled his lips and shook his head. He muttered to himself, "This kid is really impatient. He's not in charge and doesn't know how expensive rice and salt are. This secret manual can be comprehended in a few days. Just take a look and you'll know how difficult it is." After returning to her room, Zhang Xiaohua didn't waste any time. She sat on the Kong bed and started reading the page in her hand. She saw that it was clearly written on the page. It was a method to improve Qigong. Zhang Xiaohua felt a burst of excitement. Wasn't this the Qigong technique that she had been yearning for day and night? It was really a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance without any effort. Suppressing her excitement, Zhang Xiaohua read it carefully. As she compared the pictures, she studied the words. After reading it carefully, Zhang Xiaohua's enthusiasm was doused with a bucket of cold water. The foundation of this Qigong technique was inner force. It was the way to control inner force. Without inner force, learning this Qigong technique was like trying to get a fish out of a tree. Zhang Xiaohua threw the 2 pages on the table in disappointment. She smacked her lips and thought that the core of martial arts was inner force. Qigong needed it. High-level fist techniques needed it. Even sword techniques needed it. It seemed like she had to practice the Carefree Heart Sutra first. When he stood up and picked up the pages, He recalled that the third level of the ethereal steps mental cultivation method had 2 pages. He had yet to look at the second page. However, he didn't harbor any hopes. If he couldn't even master the first page, how could he possibly master the second page? The second page was also written very clearly. It was the art of levitation. Levitation? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. What did that mean? Following that, Zhang Xiaohua smacked his forehead and laughed. The previous page talked about Qinggong. The second page was obviously about what happened after Qinggong. It must be a continuation of the first page. However, this Qinggong technique didn't allow one to levitate. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that. Since the footwork technique was written like that, it should be possible. Zhang Xiaohua naturally thought so. However, after Zhang Xiaohua carefully studied it, she realized that her understanding was a little off. This levitation technique wasn't the continuation of Qinggong. It was another Qinggong technique. It was very different from Qinggong. The Qinggong technique talked about how to use inner force to circulate through the meridians in the body to achieve the effect of Qinggong. Whereas the levitation technique talked about how to release the qi from the meridians. Through the control of releasing the qi, one could achieve the effect of levitation. However, no matter which Qinggong technique it was, they all used inner force as the foundation. They were all not related to Zhang Xiaohua. However, no matter how extravagant the explanation in the manual was, no matter how thoroughly Zhang Xiaohua understood it, it was all just an illusion. Zhang Xiaohua then understood what the eldest disciple of the Misty School, Zhang Qingyue, had said when he passed the ethereal steps to her. This ethereal steps didn't have much to do with inner force. The first 2 levels were unrelated and didn't require any inner force. This was the beginning of using inner force for the third level. Presumably, the next few levels of the mental cultivation method would also be driven by inner force. Zhang Xiaohua originally wanted to return these 2 pages to He Tianshu. However, she thought that he must still be racking his brains to understand the densely packed footwork technique. If she were to go now, wouldn't she be offending him? Moreover, she didn't know any inner force mental cultivation method. Perhaps He Tianshu wouldn't impart this Qinggong technique to her. Although she didn't know it now, it didn't mean that she wouldn't know it in the future. Once she solved the problem of her yuan qi disappearing in her acupuncture points, wouldn't she be able to use her yuan qi? She should take this opportunity to comprehend these 2 Qinggong techniques first. That was the most important thing. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua sat down with peace of mind and concentrated on comprehending. After an entire afternoon, when the sky was about to turn dark, Zhang Xiaohua walked out of his little house. Zhang Xiaohua's face wasn't filled with joy. Instead, it was filled with puzzlement. After an entire afternoon of comprehending, he had basically memorized and comprehended these 2 techniques. If there was inner force in his body, Zhang Xiaohua had a lot of confidence that he would be able to use these 2 Qinggong techniques. The reason why Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand was that no matter how he comprehended the first Qinggong technique in his mind, he couldn't form a clear figure. Although he was very sure that he had really learned it, the second levitation technique was clearly displayed in his mind. Why was this? Since he comprehended the first technique first, Zhang Xiaohua spent more energy on the levitation technique. He comprehended it 3 times. When he was sure that he had learned it, he began to comprehend the second levitation technique. The comprehension of the levitation technique was far beyond Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Perhaps it was because he had just comprehended the levitation technique, the comprehension of the levitation technique was unusually smooth. Only 2 times, Zhang Xiaohua had finished comprehending it. A clear figure appeared in his mind. Zhang Xiaohua could see how the aura in the meridians was released and how to control it from this figure. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua remembered that the levitation technique hadn't shown the figure yet. So he turned back to look at the levitation technique. But this time, no matter how he comprehended it, the figure of the levitation technique didn't appear. Until the sky was dark, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to give up. Maybe he comprehended it wrongly somewhere, Zhang Xiaohua thought. During dinner, Zhang Xiaohua was still full of thoughts. He didn't notice the expressions of respect on the other tables. Moreover, his appetite wasn't very good. When he had just arrived at the villa, he had just finished practicing the fist technique and would eat a lot. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua was now growing. Every time he ate, he would be the first to arrive and the last to leave. Most of the time, he would be laughed at by the servants. But recently, Zhang Xiaohua obviously didn't eat as much as before. This seemed to be a little abnormal. After all, he was still practicing martial arts very hard. The amount of exercise was also large. He should be able to eat more than before. Perhaps it was haggard because of young Zhang Xiaohua's troubles. Hometown water, nostalgia. The servants at the side whispered and discussed endlessly. They seemed to have found a new topic. Zhang Xiaohua turned a deaf ear to this. He mechanically ate a few mouthfuls of rice and a few chopsticks of food before hurrying out. Only his back was left for others to laugh at. After leaving the small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua didn't go to the forest. He directly returned to the grass shed in the medicine field. When he passed by the other medicine fields, Zhang Xiaohua paid special attention. It wasn't full of grass sheds as he had imagined. It seemed that the other servants' desire to show off had been cast into the darkness. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was still doing his homework in the grass shed. Just as he was thinking about the circulation of internal energy in his meridians as usual, he suddenly had a new idea. Since he used the method of thinking to learn the Worry-Free Heart Sutra, why not use the method of thinking to practice Qigong? Anyway, he had already learned 2 types of internal energy cultivation methods. Why not think about the circulation of internal energy in his meridians and try Qigong? However, he probably couldn't think about the second type of levitation technique. He didn't have any internal energy. How could he release it and control it? As he thought about it, Zhang Xiaohua fell into a hazy sleep. His body quickly adjusted to a certain frequency. The power of the stars was immediately attracted to him. At the same time, the qi of heaven and earth was also absorbed into his body more effectively. Everything was so harmonious. The next day was a bright and sunny day. Zhang Xiaohua only practiced his fist and sword techniques by the grass shed. Because he needed to water the medicine field, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have much time to practice his idea of Qigong from last night. Everything in the medicine field was the same. There were fewer weeds, which reduced Zhang Xiaohua's labor. If it continued at this rate, there might not be any weeds growing in the field in a month or 2. Late in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua was watering when he heard someone calling him from the ridge. When he looked up, it was Qiu Tong. Zhang Xiaohua quickly walked over and asked with a smile, "Sister Qiu Tong, why did you suddenly come today? It's so hot today. Don't get tanned." Qiu Tong said, "It's because of you. That's why I came." Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "What's the matter, Sister Qiu Tong?" Qiu Tong looked at him and said with a smile, "Take a guess." "You really don't know?" Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua understood. He probed, "Is it about the Misty School's martial arts competition?" Qiu Tong clapped and praised, "That's right, Zhang Xiaohua. It's about that. Misty asked me to tell you that she's already registered you. She'll send someone to inform you when the day comes. Please add it to your collection. Thank you." Chapter 164. Zhang Xiaohua said gratefully, "Big Sister Qiu Tong, you could have waited until you saw me or had someone send me a message for such a small matter. Why did you have to come here personally?" Qiu Tong pursed her lips and smiled, "That's what I was thinking. But your straw hut has been quite famous in the villa these days, so I came to take a look. Perhaps I should also build one in the courtyard so that the young miss will notice me." Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed and scratched her head, "Big Sister Qiu Tong, you're making fun of me. I built this straw hut just to practice my internal energy. Who knew that it would cause so much trouble and cause so many misunderstandings?" Qiu Tong nodded, "I've already asked the young miss about your intentions." Of course she knows, but others don't. You're so unconventional, so of course you'll attract the attention of others. Especially now that you're doing so well in the villa, those who don't know will pay more attention to you. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. No way, big sister Qiu Tong. Building a hut will cause so much trouble. Why don't I just tear it down? Qiu Tong waved her hand. No need. Your straw hut will only be used until the martial arts exhibition starts. It'll only be used for a few days anyway. Why bother? Moreover, the young miss has already told the people in charge of the warehouse to scold the servants. If you tear it down, the young miss will lose face. Qiu Tong looked around the hut and asked with a smile, "Did you build this hut yourself?" Speaking of her straw hut, Zhang Xiaohua immediately perked up. She puffed out her chest and said proudly, "Yes, big sister Qiu Tong. I built it myself." Qiu Tong praised, "It's not bad. I didn't know you had such skills." Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed when she heard this and said, "It's nothing. When I was at the Guizhuang house, I often helped father and brother build it. They're the ones who built it well." Qiu Tong smiled and asked, "Then how's your internal energy training? Have you found the qi?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "It's about time. Staying here at night is quite quiet. It's really good for practicing inner strength. I think that when the martial arts exhibition starts, there should be a breakthrough." Qiu Tong nodded and advised him, "Practicing hard is a good thing. Big sister won't stop you, but you must know when to stop. Don't practice so hard just because you're going to participate in the martial arts exhibition. That's not good." Zhang Xiaohua nodded seriously and said, "I know, big sister Qiu Tong. Actually, you know that I can't practice even if I want to." Qiu Tong was stunned for a moment before she understood what he meant. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. The two of them chatted for a while longer before Qiu Tong took her leave and returned to the inner court. Zhang Xiaohua watched Qiu Tong leave and went back to work. However, before she could water the ground, she heard someone shouting from outside, Zhang Xiaohua, where are you?" Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. What day was it today? Usually, there weren't many people in the medicine field. Recently, there were even fewer people here. However, in just a short while, 2 people had come looking for him. Who was it this time? When he straightened up and took a closer look, it turned out to be his cheat master, He Tianshu. Zhang Xiaohua felt that it was strange. He Tianshu's voice was very familiar to him, but it was clearly unfamiliar just now. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the edge of the field and said with a smile, "Captain He, were you the one who called for me?" He Tianshu said in a hoarse voice, "Of course it was me. Is there anyone else nearby?" Zhang Xiaohua asked, "What happened to your voice?" He Tianshu frowned and said, "Who knows? It was fine yesterday, but this morning it became like this." Zhang Xiaohua looked at He Tianshu's 2 large dark circles and asked, "You didn't sleep last night?" He Tianshu scratched his head and said, "I did. I fell asleep while looking at it. I don't know when I fell asleep." Zhang Xiaohua didn't ask why He Tianshu was looking for him. He first took out the 2 pages of the secret manual and returned it to He Tianshu and said, "Captain He, I'll return this to you first." He Tianshu seemed to have known this result. He reached out and took it and said, "What? You want to return it to me in one night? Do you know how difficult it is inside? In the future, don't make any sarcastic remarks. Practicing martial arts requires a down-to-earth style. There's nothing good about it." Zhang Xiaohua opened his mouth and wanted to refute something. However, He Tianshu was right. Of course, it was difficult inside. He didn't have any internal energy, so he couldn't practice it. He wanted to refute, but he didn't know what to say. He might as well be silent. He Tianshu saw that Zhang Xiaohua's attitude was humble and didn't say anything. He was very happy and said, "You really built a straw shed here. I thought you were joking." "That's right, did you get the qi sense from the fierce bull strength?" Zhang Xiaohua shook his head. He Tianqiu's face was filled with sympathy. He patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said, "Don't be in such a hurry. This bull stalking force is the simplest. I believe that you'll gain something if you try to understand it during the night." Then, He Tianshu took out another page from his chest and said, "After I worked so hard yesterday, my voice became hoarse. Only then did I learn some footwork. I went to your house to find you, but I didn't know that you had settled down in the medicine field. It seems like you're determined to participate in the martial arts exhibition. Let's go to the forest. I'll teach you what I just learned. I hope that in a month's time, you'll be able to make some progress." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he cursed in his heart, "You worked so hard to learn footwork and you actually lost your voice. You're the first person in the world to do that." Hearing that He Tianshu wanted to go to the forest, he advised, "Team leader He, let's go to the medicine field. There's still some distance to the forest." When He Tianshu heard this, his face turned serious and he said, "Big sect leader has repeatedly said that only the two of us can practice the ethereal steps. There's also no cover around the medicine field. If someone secretly learns it, we'll be punished by the sect rules. We can't be careless." Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to follow him. In the forest, He Tianshu demonstrated what he had learned the night before and let Zhang Xiaohua learn it. He thought that since Zhang Xiaohua had learned it well last time and learned it without any difficulty, it should be smooth sailing this time as well. But who knew that just as Zhang Xiaohua was halfway through learning, she made a mistake. It was clearly a simple footwork, but Zhang Xiaohua couldn't do it. When she put her feet in place, her body changed and she couldn't continue with the next step. He Tianshu was depressed. It seemed like his good days were coming to an end. Hence, He Tianshu controlled his temper and taught her step by step. However, no matter how He Tianshu explained or pointed out, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't follow his instructions and learn the footwork. He Tianshu was a little anxious as he demonstrated step by step in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He looked into her eyes and asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, do you understand?" Zhang Xiaohua was also helpless as she said, "I understand, team leader He." "Then why can't you put your feet here?" He Tianshu pointed to his feet and asked. "I know it's fine to put it there, but I just can't put it down. There's a kind of inertia pushing me. My feet can't follow my heart to place them at the spot you said." Zhang Xiaohua also had an innocent look on her face. That's right. She clearly knew that she should place her feet at the spot He Tianshu pointed out, but her entire body didn't seem to listen to her commands. It was really strange. He Tianshu wanted to reprimand Zhang Xiaohua again, but he immediately thought of the situation when Zhang Xiaohua learned the fist technique. He couldn't help but sigh. Zhang Xiaohua's aptitude wasn't good. When he learned the fist technique, he could let Nie Xiaoer and the rest teach him while he dealt with it himself. But this time, he learned the ethereal steps because of Zhang Xiaohua's glory. No matter what, he couldn't be perfunctory like when he taught the fist technique. He Tianshu thought for a moment and waved his hand, saying, "How about this? You practice what you learned in the past first. I'll go back and rest. When I have enough energy tomorrow, I'll teach you seriously." Towards the end, he seemed to have made up his mind. There was a feeling that he wouldn't give up until he taught Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua responded. He Tianshu turned and left the forest. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Zhang Xiaohua's timid voice asking softly, Captain He, you should go back and rest. Can you let me see the second level's footwork?" He Tianshu stopped and thought for a moment. He took out a few pieces of paper and turned to Zhang Xiaohua, saying, "Look carefully. I hope you can discover something. Anyway, I don't plan to look at it today. I'm going to rest first. I hope that when I wake up tomorrow, I can see a brand new Zhang Xiaohua." Brand new? Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and asked, "My clothes are old and my body is dirty?" He Tianshu laughed loudly and said, "It's a Zhang Xiaohua who is no longer stupid." Finished speaking, he laughed hoarsely and walked out of the forest as if he had encountered something very interesting. Zhang Xiaohua heard his cheat master's laughter and pouted, saying softly, "I didn't say I wasn't stupid. Look at your laughter. It's like a broken gong. What's there to be proud of?" When He Tianshu walked out of sight, Zhang Xiaohua carefully looked at the secret manual in his hand. These thin pages contained all the second level's footwork, including some that Zhang Xiaohua had already learned. Zhang Xiaohua picked out the part that he had just practiced and carefully looked at it. After he finished reading, he didn't find anything strange. It was all comprehended by He Tianshu without any difference. What was the reason for this? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but scratch his head. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua thought of an idea. He read the page that he had just learned and the page that he had just learned together and linked the footwork together to comprehend it. Looking at the notes and footwork on the secret manual, a figure that was using the ethereal steps slowly appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. That figure was walking step by step according to the ethereal steps secret manual. When it came to Zhang Xiaohua's difficult point today, that figure didn't follow Professor He Tianshu's understanding and walked in another place. When Zhang Xiaohua thought of this, his eyes lit up. Wasn't this the next step after the difficult point? Could it be that there was an extra step here? Filled with doubts, Zhang Xiaohua continued to ponder. When the figure in his mind was executed according to Zhang Xiaohua's understanding, it first neglected this step and directly took another step. And the next step didn't follow the secret manual's records but returned to the place that Zhang Xiaohua was unable to step out of. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. Could it be that the two footwork records were reversed? He hurriedly looked at the small words at the side. Indeed, the records of the two footwork were very simple and didn't go into detail. Even if it was reversed, the notes were still acceptable. Zhang Xiaohua's lips curled into a smile as he executed the footwork in the open space in the forest. The result was exactly as Zhang Xiaohua had guessed. If the two steps were reversed, he would be able to execute it smoothly. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua had reversed the two footwork records in his heart. The reversal of the footwork was easier said than done. If He Tianshu was here, he would definitely not do so. It couldn't be said that Zhang Xiaohua was intelligent, or that He Tianshu's thinking was inflexible. It was just that the two of them had received different education. Ever since Zhang Xiaohua started practicing martial arts, he had always pondered and made his own decisions. The only set of Fist of the North Star was also pieced together by him. From the beginning, he had a habit of doubting everything and breaking everything. Whatever moves were suitable for him, he would use them accordingly. He even dared to change the fist techniques that others had practiced for many years, what more this footwork. As for He Tianshu, he had received formal martial arts education in the Misty School since young and was used to the textbook way of thinking. The fame of the Misty School's three great divine techniques had long been branded in his mind as a legend. When he saw this ethereal steps, he could only use a devout heart to learn and imitate it. He had never dared to doubt or question the authority of this footwork. Even if it was wrong, he would only conscientiously follow the wrong path and learn and accept it. This couldn't help but be said to be a tragedy of education. Since he had this discovery, Zhang Xiaohua no longer held back. Earlier on, he had learned a few parts that were different from what He Tianshu had taught him. This time, he changed them all. Moreover, seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua didn't return to the herb farm. He wanted to comprehend the remaining second level of the ethereal steps in one go in the forest. Of course, he didn't dare to have extravagant hopes that he would be able to comprehend the ethereal steps that He Tianshu had been unable to comprehend for many days in just half a day. But the results were out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Because he already had the experience of comprehending many different fist techniques, as well as comprehending some footwork at the beginning of the second level of the ethereal steps, although there were many footwork at the back, but with the help of Zhang Xiaohua's powerful memory and the figure in his mind, he was able to integrate the remaining footwork into his little basket in an entire afternoon. The entire second level of the footwork had a smooth outline in his mind. But after all, there was a gap between theory and practice. Although he had comprehended it and knew how to practice, it was still difficult for Zhang Xiaohua to execute it step by step. With regards to this result, Zhang Xiaohua was already extremely satisfied. What was the ethereal steps? It was one of the Misty School's 3 great divine techniques. Although the first 3 levels were the foundation of the footwork, it was still incomparably profound. Even with He Tianxu's standard, it was still difficult for him to comprehend it. But he was able to comprehend it in just half a day. What else could he say? Now that the footwork was already in his mind, he would be able to slowly master it. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to practice again, there was a sudden sound of thunder from afar. A gust of cold wind blew and droplets of rain fell from the sky. Instantly, there were pitter-patter sounds in the forest. It was raining. Zhang Xiaohua extinguished the thought of striking while the iron was hot and quickly ran towards the small courtyard. Halfway there, he thought of the books in the straw hut and had no choice but to run towards the straw hut in the herbal field. By the time he reached the straw hut, the rain was already heavy. Zhang Xiaohua did a quick check and luckily, the quality of his straw hut was still alright. It wasn't a shoddy construction and the rainwater didn't leak in at all. Standing in the straw hut and looking at the pouring rain outside, Zhang Xiaohua gave up on the idea of returning to the hut. He lit up an oil lamp and began to read his book in peace. The raindrops hit the roof of the straw hut and the pitter-patter sounds were incessant. The distant sound of thunder was also incessant and flashes of light could be seen from time to time. With such a night light and the rain hitting the straw hut, Zhang Xiaohua was reading at night. Even if he didn't have a female companion, it still had a unique flavor. At the very least, when the cold wind blew in, it wasn't a chill that an ordinary person could endure. It was getting deeper and deeper, but the rain didn't show any signs of stopping. The sound of the straw hut became denser and there were signs of it getting louder. The distant sound of thunder was also louder and seemed to be getting closer. Zhang Xiaohua closed the book and carefully put it in his arms. He then blew out the oil lamp and sat down cross-legged. It was his daily practice of drawing qi into his body. When Zhang Xiaohua entered a meditative state, he carefully perceived the qi of heaven and earth outside. He was pleased to find that the qi of heaven and earth on this rainy day was actually a bit more than usual and every trace of qi was lively and seemed to have a little more vitality. Zhang Xiaohua had a feeling and a thought emerged in his mind. The qi of heaven and earth was very fresh. But it was this fresh and lively qi of heaven and earth that caused a little difficulty for Zhang Xiaohua to draw qi. The qi of heaven and earth didn't flow from top to bottom like usual. Instead, it flowed around like fish. Zhang Xiaohua's perception couldn't draw them into his body as easily as usual. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua had to increase the strength of his perception and spread it out like a fishing net. It was true that hard work paid off. Zhang Xiaohua patiently guided the qi of heaven and earth for a period of time and successfully drew a new trace of qi into his body. This trace of qi of heaven and earth was indeed a little different from before. Although Zhang Xiaohua couldn't completely perceive its appearance in his body, he could faintly feel its liveliness and knew that it was in that part of his body. Successfully drawing in the first trace of qi of heaven and earth seemed to have built a bridge between Zhang Xiaohua's body and the outside world. More and more fresh qi of heaven and earth rushed into Zhang Xiaohua's body like moths to a flame and was drawn in endlessly. Just as Zhang Xiaohua happily drew the qi of heaven and earth into his body, the liveliness spread throughout his body. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's qi of heaven and earth became even easier. He silently recited the Heart Sutra's cultivation method and this liveliness flowed along the meridians of his previous qi of heaven and earth. Very quickly, it went through a cycle and more qi of heaven and earth was drawn in and added to this invisible stream. At this time, an accident happened. There was a loud sound. Kacha, a thunderous sound smashed right above Zhang Xiaohua's sturdy straw hut. Chapter 165. The moment the thunder roared, Zhang Xiaohua was enjoying the fruits of his labor, methodically drawing and refining qi. His perception was still outside his body. Although the thunder was high up in the sky, it still smashed into his perception that was drawing qi. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua felt as if a hammer had smashed into his heart. He was extremely depressed. There was a sweet taste in his throat and a mouthful of blood surged up. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but open his mouth and spit out a small mouthful of blood. His breathing rate of 9 shallow and 1 deep was immediately interrupted. At this moment, the lively qi from the outside world was flowing into Zhang Xiaohua's body in an orderly manner. After the thunder, the pure qi of heaven and earth suddenly increased by more than 10 times. These qi also rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua. Although the yuan qi that appeared later was pure, it was different from the yuan qi that Zhang Xiaohua had drawn in previously. The yuan qi from before was lively like a lively child, a little mischievous and playful. However, the yuan qi that suddenly appeared was not only purer than the yuan qi from before, but the most different thing was that this yuan qi was no longer just lively. It was liveliness within liveliness. It could even be said that it was tyrannical. It was like a drunken brute or a young man with nowhere to vent his energy. It disorderly rushed into the yuan qi that had lined up to enter Zhang Xiaohua's body. These disorderly, large amounts of qi immediately caused the qi outside Zhang Xiaohua's body to churn. It was like a gurgling stream just now, but in an instant, it became a monstrous wave, drowning Zhang Xiaohua in it. Countless violent qi swarmed into Zhang Xiaohua's pores. Previously, Zhang Xiaohua was still complaining about not being able to feel the qi in his body, but now, he really felt the taste of the qi rushing into his body. As Zhang Xiaohua's body was still circulating, the huge amount of qi immediately rushed into his meridians. But these qi exceeded Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Caught off guard, he immediately lost control of these qi. The violent qi immediately rushed into Zhang Xiaohua's meridians like a flood. Zhang Xiaohua immediately felt a heart-wrenching pain coming from his body. His calm state of mind instantly collapsed. At this moment, the blood that he spat out had just landed on the ground. Zhang Xiaohua was flustered. Could it be that this was qi deviation? Zhang Xiaohua, who had never experienced such a situation, was helpless and did not know what to do. However, the pain in his body continued to spread and would not stop just because of Zhang Xiaohua's ignorance. Moreover, when it rains, it pours. There was another burst of rumbling thunder above his head. An even larger amount of violent qi continued to flow into Zhang Xiaohua's body through the previously established qi channel. Zhang Xiaohua felt like he was drowning. The endless qi of heaven and earth oppressed him, like waves hitting him, making him unable to breathe and unable to lift his head. As a result, Zhang Xiaohua blissfully lost consciousness. Before losing consciousness, Zhang Xiaohua's only thought was, "Why is my luck so bad? I just found the qi, and now I'm possessed." In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's loss of consciousness was not because of qi deviation, but because it was now midnight. Our Zhang Xiaohua had fallen asleep on time. At the same time that Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep, he had just stopped his 9 shallow and 1 deep breathing, but immediately began to breathe again. The flickering in his dream guided his body, slowly adjusting to the frequency of the flickering. In an instant, the endless star power in the night sky poured into Zhang Xiaohua's body. Although the star power was thin, but it was orderly. Very quickly, it poured into Zhang Xiaohua's pores, forming a thin layer of star power around him, preventing the qi of the outside world from madly pouring in. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua's body, under the guidance of the flickering, formed a frequency that was difficult to discern with the naked eye. In addition, the rampaging qi in Zhang Xiaohua's body, under the condition of losing control, had already circulated through the existing meridians, destroying the meridians. At this time, the integration of the star power from the outside world just wrapped around the rampaging qi. The frequency of the star power was the same as the frequency of Zhang Xiaohua's body. Under this frequency, the thin layer of star power on the outer layer of the qi once again circulated along the damaged meridians. This was a wonderful situation occurred. The thin layer of star power seemed to be full of vitality, flowing along the damaged meridians. Traces of star power merged into it, constantly repairing it. Moreover, the meridians had just been damaged by the rampaging qi, and had expanded by a lot. Now that the star power had repaired it, Zhang Xiaohua's meridians had more than doubled in size. The qi wrapped in the star power did not stop rampaging, still trying to break through the shackles of the star power. But under the flickering and the frequency of the star power, the qi was gradually assimilated. The rampaging qi in the qi was gradually extracted and separated, becoming a vital component. In the process of flowing through the meridians, it passed through the shackles of the star power, merged into the meridians, merged into the flesh, merged into the bones, and even merged into Zhang Xiaohua's head. At the same time, the rain outside the straw hut was getting heavier, and the thunder was also incessant. Zhang Xiaohua's body, because of the damaged meridians and the influx of star power, did not cut off the flow of qi into the outside world. On the contrary, under this special frequency, Zhang Xiaohua's pores were like bottomless black holes, attracting endless rampaging qi. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's surroundings were surrounded by endless qi of heaven and earth. If Zhang Xiaohua was awake, she would know that the qi of heaven and earth described in the Carefree Heart Sutra was exactly like this, with only a slight difference. The difference was that the qi of heaven and earth was overly active now. Although Zhang Xiaohua was already asleep, his breathing, his frequency, and the mantra he was using were all guiding the qi of heaven and earth into his body. But what was different from before was that the thin layer of star power formed a protective membrane around his body. The rampaging qi passed through this layer of star power and was immediately divided into two parts. One part was the pure qi that Zhang Xiaohua normally drew into his body, and the other part was the mysterious vital energy that the star power had extracted from the qi. The qi was wrapped by the star power and constantly rushed into Zhang Xiaohua's meridians, while the mysterious vital energy attached to the star power also rushed into the meridians. As it merged into the meridians, it also merged into Zhang Xiaohua's body. The meridians repaired by the star power were originally nourishing, but after the vital energy merged into the meridians, it was as if a catalyst had been added. Not only did the speed of repair increase, the meridians were also filled with vital energy. Just like a young person, the meridians became more resilient and elastic. Moreover, this mysterious vital energy also merged into Zhang Xiaohua's bones that had been tempered by the Big Dipper magical fist along with the circulation of the vital energy. Drops of vital energy seeped into the 108 bones evenly. The pure white bones became even whiter as the vital energy merged into them. Gradually, they became like jade. However, more and more of the mysterious vital energy continued to move upward under the flickering call. It gathered in Zhang Xiaohua's brain and entered a mysterious place. Other than the circulation of the mysterious vital energy, the qi wrapped by the star power was the same as before. It flowed in the meridians that were gradually recovering and was slowly being tempered. It was the same for the star power. Not long after, a cycle was completed. The qi of heaven and the star power were much more condensed and flowed into the middle dantian. After that, more rampaging qi of heaven and earth and the star power flowed in again and started a new round of tempering. After an unknown amount of time had passed, the rain was still pouring down, and the sound of thunder, however, had stopped. Zhang Xiaohua was still sitting there cross-legged and tempering the qi of heaven and earth. The boundless qi of heaven and earth was becoming less and less. Some of it was absorbed into Zhang Xiaohua's body, but most of it dissipated between heaven and earth. It was not until dawn that the rain stopped and the qi of heaven and earth returned to its original state. There were only traces of qi of heaven and earth floating above the herb field. In the distance, a ray of light rose and supported the sun. Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes. After the rain, the air in the herb field was exceptionally fresh. After the rain, the herbs in the herb field were also abnormally energetic. In the eyes of Zhang Xiaohua, there was only a feeling of vitality. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua had already remembered the danger last night. He quickly stood up and moved his hands and feet. Fortunately, he was not paralyzed and his hands and feet listened to his commands. He was about to sit down cross-legged and use the Heart Sutra to check his meridians when he suddenly felt that his body was sticky and uncomfortable. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that there was a thin layer of black mud on his body and there were traces of blood in it. He brought his arm to his nose and there was a nauseating stench and blood. Zhang Xiaohua did not know what happened after he fell asleep last night. When he looked carefully on the ground, he discovered that the blood he spat out last night had already dried up. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and thought for a moment. He could not remember anything and hurriedly walked out of the straw hut. Before he left, he even used his feet to rub some dirt to cover up the blood. It was useless to think about anything now. It was better to take care of his personal hygiene first. Fortunately, it was still early in the morning due to the heavy rain last night. There was no one in the small courtyard. After Zhang Xiaohua had washed up and returned to his own hut, he heard the sounds of someone else moving around in the small courtyard. The heavy rain had just stopped in the morning and the ground outside was filled with mud. Zhang Xiaohua temporarily stopped his morning exercise and took out the few thin pages of the Ethereal Steps manual. Fortunately, there was no damage. Zhang Xiaohua carefully placed them on the study table before he had the time to sit cross-legged on the Kong bed. Just as he was about to circulate his qi, Zhang Xiaohua raised his head to look out of the window with lingering fear. The day was already clear and the sky was clear. The sun in the distance had already jumped out, slowly spreading its heat. Zhang Xiaohua was relieved. The pain of qi deviation, he was really afraid. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to easily release his perception. Instead, he silently chanted the incantation of the Carefree Heart Sutra, trying to recall the formless inner energy in his body. This time, he almost caused Zhang Xiaohua to lose his realm. Originally, it was just an illusion and he was unable to sense the inner energy in his meridians. But now, with a slight increase in his qi, he immediately felt the thin strand of qi in his meridians. This was the inner energy that he Tianshu and the rest had mentioned. Zhang Xiaohua was once again overjoyed. He was not dreaming, right? If not for the fact that he was concentrating on circulating his qi, Zhang Xiaohua would have tried biting his own finger. However, that wisp of cool gas flowed smoothly through his meridians like mercury, truly carefree. There was also a slight swelling pain, all of which reminded him that this was not a dream, but a reality that truly existed. Zhang Xiaohua faced this situation and did not know what to say. The danger last night was still vivid in his mind. And when he woke up, he felt qi. This was also true. Then, something must have happened last night that he did not know about. But what was it? No one could tell Zhang Xiaohua. However, since it was a good thing and not a bad thing, he could not find someone to get to the bottom of it. He could only be a taciturn gourd and accept the fruits of victory. A good thing was always better than a bad thing. If he woke up early in the morning and found that he could not move his hands and feet, wouldn't that be 10,000 times more tragic than now? At that time, Zhang Xiaohua would be the one who wanted to cry but had no tears. Why should he be distressed now? Moreover, if he closed his eyes, he would never wake up again. Zhang Xiaohua gave up on finding the reason. He circulated his qi and drove the inner energy to circulate through his meridians. This feeling was really different from reality. Zhang Xiaohua found it very refreshing. It was really fun to have this thing in his body. Zhang Xiaohua had a playful attitude and circulated the Carefree Heart Sutra's inner energy through his meridians for 36 circulations. When he finished, he was about to get up when his heart suddenly moved. He circulated his qi and released his perception to guide the inner energy. When he carefully sensed the outside world, he found that the qi of heaven and earth that had swarmed in last night had already disappeared without a trace. All that was left was a blank space. His perception could not guide the slightest bit of qi of heaven and earth. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but frown. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua's perception seemed to have sensed something as it retreated like the tide. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of Zhang Xiaohua's room. Zhang Xiaohua quickly jumped down from the Kong bed and walked to the door as he asked, "Who is it?" "It's me." It was He Tianshu's voice. Zhang Xiaohua quickly opened the door and asked with a smile, "Captain He, why are you up so early today?" He Tianshu entered the room and said, "It's still early. I woke up a long time ago. I knew you were sleeping like a log, so I didn't come early." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He looked at the sky outside. It was still early. He Tianshu did not beat around the bush. He stretched out his hand and said, "Give it to me." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned again. He asked curiously, "What is it?" "I'll give it to you." He Tianshu said in a bad mood, "It's the Ethereal Steps Manual. Hurry up and give it to me. After I gave it to you yesterday, I didn't sleep well. I was afraid that something would happen to you if I left it there. Last night, there was heavy rain and thunder, making me anxious. I was afraid that you would sleep in that straw shed again. If you wet this manual, what would I do?" Zhang Xiaohua finally understood. She quickly walked to the desk and returned the few pages to He Tianshu. He Tianshu hurriedly took them and looked at them carefully. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he carefully kept them. After keeping them, He Tianshu seemed to heave a sigh of relief. He said, "Luckily you didn't sleep in the straw shed last night. Let's not talk about how a straw shed can shelter you from the wind and rain. If you caught a cold or had a fever, it would be a small matter. The main point is that the thunder last night was too strange. It struck right above our heads. You don't know, Zhang Xiaohua. For those of us who practice inner strength, it is taboo to practice inner strength on a rainy day. The sound of thunder is usually very abrupt. It interferes with the flow of inner strength. If we are not careful, our chi will go astray and it will be impossible to make up for it. Furthermore, practicing inner strength requires the harmony of one's chi. Think about it, isn't that thunder the nemesis of meditation? It is very easy to lose one's mind. Furthermore, last night's thunder struck right above our heads. It made my little heart beat wildly last night. However, it's fine that you didn't go to the straw shed last night. With the way you sleep, even if the thunder struck right above your head, you probably wouldn't know." He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua and did not forget to add, "Furthermore, you have yet to sense qi. There is no inner strength in your meridians. I believe that the sudden thunder will not be able to do anything to you." "That's right, have you seen the footwork? Isn't it rare? I think it's better for me to look at it first." "It's pointless for you to look at it." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Why was this He Tianshu giving advice in hindsight? If he had told him this yesterday, he wouldn't have foolishly run to the straw shed to be frozen. Even if he was frozen, he wouldn't have foolishly tried to draw any qi. Now that he thought about it, this kind of action was like the god of longevity eating arsenic. He was simply tired of living. He was just short of this warning. Last night, he almost closed his eyes and passed away just like that. He Tianshu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was silent and thought that he had received a blow from looking at the ethereal steps yesterday. He patted his shoulder and said, "It's all right, Zhang Xiaohua. I feel that you still have some talent in this footwork. Although you haven't understood the second level of the footwork yet, it's fine. Once I understand it, I will teach you. Don't worry, it won't affect your participation in the martial arts exhibition. After all, I also need," at this point, He Tianshu didn't continue. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he hurriedly said, "That's not it, Captain He. I've carefully looked at this footwork, I feel that." He Tianshu waved his hand and stopped him from continuing, saying, "I know, I feel that it's quite profound and hard to understand. You should know that this footwork is a secret of our Misty School. If it wasn't difficult, would it be called that? As long as we have the time, we can grind an iron pestle into a needle. I think that as long as we put our efforts into it, we will definitely be able to learn it. Isn't it just the first 3 levels of the basics?" Zhang Xiaohua could only nod. He Tianshu saw that Zhang Xiaohua admitted his mistake and didn't stay any longer. He said, "I won't talk to you anymore. Time is precious. Seeing that the martial arts exhibition is getting closer and closer, I need to seize the time to comprehend the footwork. In a while, if you have nothing to do, go to the medicine field and walk around. I'll leave the matter of the herbs to you. When the martial arts exhibition is over, I'll have Nye Xiao'er and the others properly thank you." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was amused and said, "How about having them teach me martial arts?" When He Tianshu heard this, his face turned bitter, but he immediately thought that it would be better to die than to die. He immediately changed his smile and said, "Okay, I'll promise you on their behalf. When they come back, each of them will teach you a set of fist techniques. How about it?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "I can't learn any fist techniques. It's better to teach me some common sword techniques or blade techniques in the Jianghu." He Tianshu smiled craftily and said, "Okay, I'll let them teach you personally." The word "them" was especially clear.